everyone. I'd like to welcome some folks who were here last time, but back to the previously scheduled City of Quincy City Council Finance Committee meeting. Before we get into sort of rules of engagement, I would ask clerk to call the roll, please.
Councilor Moore.
Present.
Councilor Finn.
Present.
Councilor Harris. Councilor Forrest. Councilor Liam. Councilor Conducci. Chairman Kroll.
Present. We have a quorum, and there are other councils had notified me, and the weather was a little bit of an impediment to getting here, so we'll be right. I'd just like to read into the record the open meeting law, which is as follows. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting and may transmit this meeting during the meeting. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are deemed, acknowledged, and permissible. In terms of this evening, obviously we have before us multiple council orders. I'll just take a moment and run folks through them. We'll be discussing tonight. The first one is Council Order 2017-133, which is an appropriation for $7.1 million for new animal shelter. The second one is Council Order 2017, which is an appropriation for $2.7 million for the land acquisition of St. Mary's School. And finally, Council Order 2017-135, which is an appropriation for $2.3 million for traffic, bicycle parking, and pedestrian safety master plan traffic improvements. That being said, we committed at the last meeting, we did have a very substantial public hearing, and thank you to those folks sincerely. Thank you for coming out and participating in public dialogue. I think that's what makes good conversations great. So thank you for that. I did make mention that just in case folks weren't able to make the last public hearing, that I had and did leave it open. So I don't know if anyone hadn't spoken at the last public hearing or had any additional dialogue they wanted to share with the committee here this evening pertaining to those bond orders that I just read off. But I would essentially say that the floor is yours. You can approach the microphone if you feel that you may be a little speaking in a microphone is not your thing. There are opportunities at the back of the hall outside those doors to sign either in favor, in opposition, or undecided, so that your comments become part of public record. So with that, before we go on presentation, I just sit at the floor.
I thought he had. Too late. Those hands have been enjoyed. I did speak a bit to the shelter the other night. I just saw the article in the Ledger. And again, I want to remind the body, I volunteered at the shelter for 10 years. I've done it all. I've cleaned kennels, I've walked dogs, I've done adoptions. I've seen the operation. Trust me, I know that facility has seen better days. It's inadequate, and there are plenty of problems there. The amount of money in the facility that's being proposed, however, is a disaster looking for a place to happen. It's too big an operation concerns down the road that I think this body needs to consider. For starters, the shelter currently has space for 12 dogs. That's probably good to cover 90-95% of the year in an average year, barring a special situation where animals are being held for a legal matter. A few years ago, they had a handful of Doberdoodles because somebody was running a clinic or a breeding operation in Mr. Calucci's district. I can remember about 10 years ago, we had an incestuous bunch of wire hair terriers, and there was a order. There was conservancy. You should have dogs for a year or two. But 12 dogs is 12 dogs is not a bad number. 20, if you want some comfort. They need more space, they don't have a lot, I understand that. The cats, 25 is a better number, current capacity. The problem is, people view cats as disposable. The shelter is overburdened. It does need different facilities. They have health problems regularly. They can't bring them in. When it gets to kitten season, nobody wants a mature cat. It is a problem. They do need more different space. But in terms of some of the other bells and whistles, I couldn't believe the facility. I looked up comparables on shelters. $300 a square foot is kind of a good number, but it's on the high end. It's a bells and whistles facility at $300 a square foot. Talk to the people that built Situate. Granted, it's a smaller shelter, but the capacities and facilities that that shelter has that they now know they didn't need. They had more money than God to build that. May I also remind you, I can't remember the city, just remembered when I was walking over. Somewhere in the South Shore, the Animal Rescue League had a joint request that allowed them to build a very palatial facility. It was a joint animal control service shelter facility rather than having the neighboring communities do it. It just about broke the back of the Animal Rescue League. They had to walk away, and they couldn't even find a vet clinic to come by and set up a kennel. I can't remember the community that about 6 years ago. As for the facility proposed, they're talking about 1,460 square feet for the animal control. That's 30% larger than the current facility. These are just some metrics. 30% more than the whole building now, which includes all the animals. $1,350 for a spay and neuter clinic. Folks, that's a medical clinic facility. You're not going to get the utilization. Who's going to pay for this? 3,200 square feet for the canine unit. The dogs go home with the officers. They need a place to park the dogs when they can't leave the car. Maybe they need a training facility, but there's been a co-op discussion with other communities. And then finally, 1,600 for shared facilities. I'm assuming that's bathroom and meeting space. My concern is you're looking at having to probably hire additional people. You've got $200,000 worth of operating expenses at minimum, on top of $350,000 worth of debt service. You have to rethink this. This thing's just, God knows if the road ends up on the board of $500,000, and it's really a driveway. You got to rethink this, because down the road, you're depending on the volunteer body, and if they cannot supply the labor, free labor, to run this much larger service facility, the city's looking at what are you going to do then? You go the way that the Animal Rescue League facility went down to the South Shore and close up. You got to consider it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
For the record. She got it out.
Thank you. Anything else?
I just had a quick question. The community preservation bond, is that before you this evening, or is that?
We're going to take that up the next council meeting.
Next council
In
meeting.
5 minutes.
Just in general, then?
Did you want? Yeah, of course.
Well,
Share your comments, for sure.
David Murphy, 9 Bromfield Street, long supporter of park projects. I actually started my career in the park department. I know that the council has a wide array of decisions, many of which involve investing in our park system. I know I wear multiple hats from the community preservation committee member to president of the Park Conservancy to resident and father who uses all of our playing fields throughout the community. So I do want to indicate my support for the overall investment into our park system. I do think it is a tremendous difference maker on the quality of life of a city like ours, and I sincerely appreciate this body has made improving our parks throughout every neighborhood of our city. And certainly when the CPC issue comes up, I wanted to come back and say a few words about the playground project.
That's it.
It's on the, on tonight's docket. Why aren't we talking about this? My board has reached out to me about this particular. Why aren't we speaking about this? Who made that decision?
Well, Councilor, and I appreciate the question. That was actually a conversation that I had with the mayor's representative, Chris Walker, leading up to and including the meeting that began.
Right, but I'm not part of the mayor's office. I'm wondering why. I'm not part of the mayor's office. I'm wondering why we're not talking about this tonight.
I wondered the same thing, why it was on the agenda, right? But I had spoken with Chris, and sequentially, because as you know, there's a lot of financial decisions being made throughout this body in this committee. We agreed upon that we would take that, we would deal with the transfer from the Vermont, that we did last meeting.
Well, who's we?
Chris and I, the mayor's representative.
And you.
Correct.
But what about the rest of the body?
Well, it's my job as the committee chairman to put the agenda together, right, with the cooperation and partnership with the mayor's office. So
Because I know that I have, my board has reached out to me about this.
Oh, and that'll be as I mentioned, that'll be the first thing that we take up next meeting. But thank you for the question.
No, next meeting is when?
A week from Monday.
Right, as things go on. All right.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'll be quick.
Thank you. John Rutherford, 62 Grand Mall Road. This bond here is for $7 million. So not only are you authorizing $7 million to build this park shelter, but the interest on the first year of the bond will be an additional $140,000. And then there'll probably be 20 years worth of interest on this bond on top of it. I'd rather see you approve all the other bonds that Mayor Cook is asking for, and send this one back. Vote no on this one. Have you come back with a much leaner dog park that we can approve in next year's budget. I'd rather see another bond come back to fix some of the roads in Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4, or Ward 6. We're in a position right now where we're bonding a lot of different things, and if you had to include this in the budget, it would be a lot leaner than the $7.1 million. So I would ask to not support this issue for approving the dog park at $7.1 million. Thank you.
John? Anybody else wishing to speak here this evening? Anybody else wishing to speak here this evening? Either in favor, in opposition, or undecided? Okay, well, again, the opportunity is available at the back of the room, outside of the doors, to weigh in either one of those three manners. And at this point, I will call the public hearing closed and go to the matters before us, of which Council Order 2017-133, which is an appropriation for $7.1 million for new animal shelter, and we welcome members of the project team and presenters to the podium. Good evening.
Good afternoon, committee members. Paul Hines, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Buildings. We have a representative of the architectural firm and the planning firm that planned this facility. We have the most versed and most intelligent conversation with you on the matters of the facility and the best able to answer your questions. So we'll call him forward at this point. We've asked him to be a brief PowerPoint, and then I'll return to the microphone if you will.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here, and I love your room that you have here. It's quite wonderful. All right, I'm sorry. Just to tell you a little bit about our firm, RFA has designed over 450 animal care facilities in pretty much every state in the United States, and we work internationally. Basically, we live, eat, breathe, and sleep animal care facilities. That's basically all we do. shelters are a fundamental part of our work. I would like to show you some examples of our work, both larger facilities and smaller facilities, and then I'd like to talk about the proposed shelter here in Quincy. Today's animal shelters have come a long way from the prison-like dog pounds that they once used to be. Today's animal shelters are a fun place to be, an educational place to be, and actually an inspirational place to experience. Today's animal shelters are an integral part of the community, and like the community center, or town library, or children's museum, Belmont County Animal Shelter in Ohio is just such a shelter. RFA also created the concept of the Interactive Public Corridor, IPC, which is shown here running along the center of this animal shelter. It's kind of like the center aisle of a typical shopping mall. It enables visitors to fully experience and fully partake in all the wonderful facets of the shelter. And an IPC is included in the Quincy Animal Shelter program. RFA also created the concept of, this went out. Is it on your computers? RFA also created the concept of canine cottages to enable dogs to live in an environment that is similar to being in a home. And this too is included in the Quincy Animal Shelter program. This is the main entrance to the Pittsford Companion Animal Village. This is a partial floor plan of the canine cottages. And actually, this shelter is where RFA first developed and implemented the canine cottage concept. This is a view over the village of the canine housing cottages. And this is the center of one of those canine cottages. Just to show you that the proposed animal shelter for Quincy is actually quite smaller than what some communities have built. This is the shelter for the San Francisco SPCA, in which phase one alone was about $30 million. This is currently one of the largest animal shelters built to date in the United States. This is the animal medical component of the SPCA shelter. The San Francisco SPCA has become a really beloved part of San Francisco. Another animal shelter that is also beloved by surrounding community is the Dane County Humane Society in Madison, Wisconsin. This contains another good example of the interactive public corridor running up and down the center of this shelter. The IPC provides visual access to a multitude of activities and really inspirational experiences for visitors. Like Quincy, it also contains a spay-neuter clinic. Also, like Quincy, it contains animal control. On the left is a photo of the interactive public corridor. The IPC also provides a multitude of fundraising opportunities. Note the inscribed floor tiles along the floor, and on the left, what's called a wall of honor. Visible from the IPC are pet bonding cubicles along this interactive corridor, and cat playrooms shown on the right. This shelter in Bryan, Texas also contains canine housing cottages seen on the upper left of this axonometric drawing. The canine cottages are shown here on the upper left, part of this floor plan. The traditional linear dog housing runs are on the right side of this floor plan. And the IPC runs across the middle of this shelter. Today, people think of their pets as members of their family. So today's shelters also often respond to the needs of pets and their owners from birth to the end of life. Here, in this project, a pet mausoleum with crypts and areas of contemplation is located off the upper right side of this site plan, that small little building just above the pond. Just south of us, an animal shelter close to home in Bristol, Rhode Island. Like Quincy, it too contains animal control facilities. Bristol has both a small IPC and a canine housing cottage shown on the far left of this floor plan. Animal control is located on the lower level of this facility. The exterior of the canine cottage is on the far end of the upper left photo. The interior of the canine cottage is on the upper right side. Note in the center, the canine bonding and acquainted area in the middle of all of the housing runs. The cat playrooms, the cats are on the lower left photo, and the close-up of the exterior dog exercise runs just outside the canine cottage is on the lower right photo. Another shelter that contains, another shelter that confirms that Quincy is not overbuilding is a shelter in Dover, New Hampshire. The Chico Valley is a ground-up new construction project. The interactive public art runs down the center of this entire shelter and also contains animal control. Another example of a shelter much larger than Quincy is all new construction in Tampa Bay, Florida. This shelter had to be designed around two mammoth trees, historic trees that had to be protected and preserved and incorporated into the overall project design. This is the shelter's reception waiting area. And this is the shelter's memorial pet garden. It incorporates one of the two existing monumental trees, and the memorial garden also creates donation opportunities. Note the brick pavers along the right side, and the animal sculptures with donor recognition plaques, a waterfall and reflection pond with donor recognition plaque as well. This is a renovation in addition to an existing shelter in Syracuse, New York. In fact, I was just there yesterday. This is a close-up of the new front entrance into the existing part of the shelter. On the right is the existing front building to be renovated. On the left is the new addition behind the existing shelter. Note the small interactive public corridor, IPC running across the center of this shelter. On the left is the new reception area. On the right is the new IPC, which views into pet bonding rooms. This is the shelter also somewhat larger than Quincy in Little Rock, Arkansas. This too was all new construction. The main entrance is on the left. The waiting area in the IPC is on the right. Note the IPC running across the center of this shelter, and note the standard traditional linear type runs on the upper portion. Like Quincy, this too contains animal control and a spay-neuter clinic. Just north of us is the Northeast Animal Shelter in Salem, Massachusetts. This was an interior renovation of their cat bonding and housing areas and play areas. It shows the partial floor plan of the cat play areas. And these cat playrooms are another example of one of RFA's innovations. But I will tell you in all honesty that this project does have one major problem, and that is that these cats just don't want to be adopted. This is the front entrance to one of the largest shelters ever built in the United States, located in Orange County, California. It is currently under construction. This is an overall site plan. It is a mammoth project. The campus contains a main building on the left and canine housing kennels on the right. A curvilinear public promenade runs down the center of the kennels. This is a $35 million project. It contains 61,000 square foot of buildings, plus extensive site work and a new access road to the shelter. This is that curvilinear public promenade running through the center of the canine buildings. The main building is in the background of this. This is an aerial view of the entire shelter campus under construction. A more recent aerial view of the public promenade. Another recent aerial view of the public parking in front of the building. Note the water retention and reclamation area in the center. Another recent aerial view of the public promenade. This is a ground-up new construction shelter in Tinley Park, Illinois. Another axonometric of that shelter. This contains an excellent example of an IPC which runs across the center of the shelter. Note the more traditional linear canine housing towards across the top. Like Quincy, this also contains a spay-neuter clinic, animal control, and a multi-purpose meeting room. This is a county animal shelter in Roseville, California. This is all new construction. This is another example of an interactive public corridor. Like Quincy, it too contains animal control, a veterinary clinic, and a multi-purpose meeting room. This is the shelter's reception and waiting area with a view down into the IPC on the far right. The Southeast Area Animal Control Authority in Downey, California. This was all new construction, and like Quincy, includes a spay-neuter clinic, which you see on the right side. The Siska Pet Adoption Center in Dayton, Ohio. This is about to go into construction very shortly. And like Quincy, this contains a multi-purpose meeting room, which is shown on the lower left. The multi-purpose meeting rooms are becoming a real important part of many animal shelters, not only for large and small meetings, but also for training obedience, doggy daycare, and fundraising events. Note the IPC running across the shelter, the center of the shelter, and like Quincy, this too contains animal control and a spay-neuter clinic. The Siska Pet reception area is on the left, the cat housing condos are on the right, and the dog housing runs are on the lower right. This regional animal shelter in Modesto, California, this serves a number of surrounding towns and communities. Unlike Quincy, it is rather large, but like Quincy, also contains animal control, a small interactive public corridor, and traditional linear canine housing runs and a spay-neuter clinic. The shelter's reception area is shown on the upper right. The IPC is shown on the lower left. This also is a good example of a shelter with a very tight budget and very strict control and limitation with limited resources. So let's look at the Quincy Animal Shelter. This is the conceptual site plan, which includes the animal shelter, the dog park, which is separately funded, public walking trails, and direct access off of Quarry Street. This is a very detailed project program, which is the foundation for the entire shelter project. It is 12 pages long. The program contains every room, every space, every area within this facility. The program also contains the details, the amenities, and all the equipment within each room, area, and space. This program was developed with extensive meetings with each and every group that will occupy the facility. And this program was reviewed and thoroughly scrutinized by every individual involved in the shelter project. The final project program is what is now being presented to you for your review and approval here tonight. This is a diagram that graphically shows you the various areas of the Quincy Animal Shelter as it has been allocated and proportioned. The animal shelter accounts for about 57% of the entire program. The spay-neuter clinic, about 9.1%. And the animal control 9.8%, and the K-9 police unit about 21.3%, with the shared support functions that serve all of them, about 11% of the project. The total project area is just under 21,000 square feet. This is an overview of the allocation of the project development costs totaling about $7.1 million. And this is the current status of where we are today and what now lies ahead with your blessing. The future of the Quincy Animal Shelters is in your hands here today, and we stand ready to help you to make this dream become a reality. Thank you very much. I will be pleased to answer any questions.
Any feedback? Council Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have served on the Animal Shelter Building Committee and Planning Committee and helped write the grant from the Stanton Foundation for the dog park. This is a project that I particularly am passionate about. When I first was elected to office and I see Auntie Peg in the audience, one of the board members had said to me, "This is in your district, can you come see and they need some help?" And I've been advocating for that ever since. So the Animal Shelter is one of our best nonprofit organizations in the city. We have a lot of the volunteers come up here Monday night at public hearing. We have 150 active volunteers who each have a job, put their time and talents in for the good of our community. I had the opportunity earlier today to go back into the shelter with the executive director and do a little tour. So I feel like we want to be at home viewer to be able to see what we inside the shelter is if they haven't been there. And it's a very, very tight space. Mara, when your firm applied to responded to the RFP, your qualifications of your firm blew everybody away. I mean, we were just astounded by your qualifications. And for you, when you met us in the first site visit, you talked about how you're from Newton, and this is a shelter, you travel the world, and you are renowned in shelters and veterinary facilities, and that this was a project in your own backyard that had an easy commute. So we value working with a local.
One of the reasons why it means so much to us.
Right. I think a couple of things that I just wanted to kind of go through is we did one of the exercises I was involved with of the planning documents, and you had interviewed all of the stakeholders who would potentially use the space as far as what their wants and needs were. And we're looking at a big facility because of that. You presented a lot, as you have to the committee, different shelters. I guess I just want to understand, while we have a concept, while we have a planning document, while we have ideal square footage of wish list, we do not have it designed today. This is the rendering, this is what to expect here. That's the next phase of the work for you. So I think if you could just talk a little bit about, we're showing you examples, we have a concept, we have a framework, kind of a little bit next steps, because there's two things here. It's the design and the engineering for this project, as well as construction funds. We have 22 acres, and I think in particular, we have 22 acres of city space that if Council McNamee was sitting here, he would tell you is scrubland and useless. And we're opening 22 acres of public space with pet-friendly amenities. So I think that that's important to qualify this project with, but in particular, the topographical challenges that the site has. So if you could talk a little bit about why, kind of what's next on the design front, because that is clearly a factor in this project's cost.
Okay, that program that I showed you, it's a very detailed list of, as I said, every room, every space, every area, and all the amenities and all the equipment. So that, think of that program as a box full of puzzle pieces. How many pieces, the size of each piece, what's in each piece. The next step is to take all those puzzle pieces and put it together into a schematic design. And a tremendous amount of thought and time has gone into developing that program so that everything that's needed for the shelter is included in the program. So the next step, with your blessing, your approval, is to take those and actually create a floor plan. And I showed you some examples of what floor plans look like for shelters today. So that's the next step. And then with the floor plan, we'll develop the envelope of the building. We have a conceptual site plan now, which is, as you say, it's a framework. We know essentially where the shelter will go within that site plan framework. So the next step is the schematic design.
And I think the other thing that is very different from our existing conditions, and I mean, we have some very difficult existing conditions, and the shelter team, the animal control team does a phenomenal job working with what we have. But in particular, can you talk to us, because this was something that you really brought to my attention that wasn't really on my radar before, was a lot of the air quality systems and the segregation required by the standards to build out an animal shelter. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yes. The whole technology of shelters has come a long way in the past decade or two. And this involves your waste removal systems.
Which, I just want to say, are existing are trash barrels next to the dog kennels and a trough that we just wash out into kind of a catch basin. That's existing.
As an example, we would have flushing floor drains, flushing truck drains. It's kind of like having a toilet in the floor in a way that you can hose solids, liquids, diarrhea, whatever, into, and it all flushes away. You're not picking this stuff up, which cuts down a lot on labor to manage and run the facility.
And I would suppose as well as to illnesses, airborne illnesses for the pet's health as well.
The shelter
And the volunteers health.
The shelter is cordoned off into zones, so we don't mix air from one to another. The air is purified as it is circulated. So there's mechanical systems, plumbing systems. Some areas we have positive pressure, other areas we have negative pressure, and also there's acoustics. We will have sound absorption, both for high and low frequencies. High frequencies like howl, low frequencies like bark. So we absorb sound energy within every space. And then the next step is STC, sound transmission coefficient, is preventing sound from moving from one space to another. And again, for both high and low frequencies. And then there is the same thing with the envelope of the building, so that no sound within the shelter ever leaves the shelter outside. So these are all different facets of today's shelter. They're quite sophisticated, but in the end, it makes not only a wonderful place for these pets and animals, but also for the staff and equally for visitors who come looking for a member of their family to adopt.
So let's transition to the visitor experience. So today's visitor experience, we right now have a lot of our volunteers who foster, a tremendous foster program, whether it's for the cats or for the dogs, and they're able to be housed in a home setting, and then they need to be brought to the shelter for that great experience. So today I sat in the cat cage, and it's literally a chain link fenced area that has a chair, has a cat climbing a tree, and that's it. That's the space that you kind of gate yourself into, so you can have some time to meet and greet the pet that you're going to bring home to your family. So not a high quality visitor experience. However, today is September 20th. In the month of September alone, 31 cats, it's called Happy Tails. They keep a great log. 31 cats have been adopted home just in the month of September to date
Fantastic.
in this gate system. I suppose they're making it function, but I can imagine this is the quality of services our shelter volunteers are delivering in existing conditions, that it would be a much better quality of life for both the pet and for the family coming to the shelter to take that pet home to their family.
Oh, yeah. Like I was saying during the presentation, shelters today really are. They're an enjoyable, fun place to go. They're educational, they're inspirational, and they really do become a very beloved part of the community. And I think that what's been programmed Quincy shelter has all of those attributes.
So a lot of the shelters you've worked with, do they have the level of volunteerism existing in their existing facilities when you're transitioning them to a new facility? Or were you, I mean, I'm particularly impressed with the number of consistent volunteers when we have to go there volunteer appreciation night every fall. But I'm curious because I'm always over impressed by the number of committed volunteers they have.
I think with this shelter, that list of volunteers is going to become quantumly greater. I think there'll be a long list. And then, another thing that should be taken into consideration is that a shelter like this, I think, is going to attract tremendous amount of donations.
And so I guess, I want to get back to the donations in a minute, and I might defer to maybe someone in the mayor's office on that question. But the other thing is we're talking about happy and healthy pets, but there's also a lot of pets that are coming in from very difficult situations. And I just want to focus particularly on the veterinary care. So today was Wednesday's vet day. The vet comes in each week to the animal shelter. The volunteers are very invested in their consistent medical care, giving medicines and things. In the quarantine of how you're, one, the stress on the animals, two, why they need to be segregated environments, the animals that are coming in from difficult situations versus someone who maybe had to surrender due to illness or age or family moving or something like that. But if you could just kind of distinguish.
Well, when the animals first come in, they're quarantined until they're evaluated, both in terms of their psychological aspect and also their medical aspect. And if they require treatment, especially if they might be infectious, they're treated before they go into the general population. And that another way to prevent the spread of disease.
And the volume, I guess the other thing I wanted to ask was about the volume of intake, whether it's from the cats. I mean, last week alone we had 8 dogs adopted from the animal shelter. I think people, see the list of who's available for adoption in the newspaper each week. He doesn't tend to see a lot of dogs in the Quincy shelter listings, but there's times there's a big uptick. So last week there was 8 dogs in there. The case of the doodles was a long publicized case. It was an animal control, it was a police-related case. I guess I wanted to talk about when you're looking at planning for the size for the future for a city of 100,000 people, we're in a very undersized, right, space existing. Are you seeing, when you're talking about our programming and the design and build, you're talking about this is the facility for the future. When you're looking at other communities our size and what they're doing, is this in line?
It's very much in line. In fact, I think one of the things I tried to show during the presentation was that there are shelters that are being built that are quantumly larger. But Quincy seems to almost be dead on to where it should be, especially relative to a city like Quincy. So, and like I said, a tremendous amount of thought went into the development of that program, which is the foundation for the entire shelter.
And you also referenced, so I think one, it's hard for us to see the scope, right? So what's the size of the existing shelter, to see the size of this building, see it on paper, see all these different renderings and where we fit in. Be it that this is our contract with a professional architectural firm who's familiar with these facilities to help guide us through this process. So I guess I just looking to hear from you, yes, be it the different services that will be being rendered from this facility. The spay and neuter clinic, is that something that we will see a vet housed out of? Is that almost like a public-private partnership? Is that something specific to the shelter when you reference that clinic? What was the vision on that?
Well, this is...
Because I know sometimes we have a spay mobile that comes to Quincy, and there's a definite need that we're seeing for the low-cost spay and neuter clinics. So this area, I feel like, is lacking in that service, and it has some mobile services that we work with.
Right, I mean, this is a city of Quincy shelter, and this is a service that's being provided. I'm sure that fees are going to be charged.
Right, so I think, I guess that's what I wanted to get into, is kind of the revenue opportunities, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I take my dog typically to the vet, but there's been times, say for a cat, I brought the cat out to the rabies clinic, got the shot, got the license for the year. And you're talking about revenue opportunities that someone can, the Quincy Animal Shelters, every time that they take an animal in, they have spayed neutered before they're adopted out, they cover those services and then pass the fee on with the adoption fee.
Keep in mind too, that there are 4 components to this shelter. There's the animal shelter, there's the spay neuter, there's animal control, and the canine unit. So, you know, this is not, I think that's one of the reasons why we got 21,000 square feet, because there are 4 significant components to this.
So, and the other thing that, you know, particularly involved me in it when my dog Sydney was at first campaign promise, my first election, so my daughter was to kind of negotiate that if she was going to have to sacrifice to support her mother running for office, I should sacrifice and she should get the dog. So we adopted Sydney through Pet Finder, and our options were to pick Sydney up in a Connecticut parking lot or to go to a clinic in Medway, I believe. And so Massachusetts does not really have a lot of opportunities for quarantine facilities for these Pet Finder adoptions. And that was something that we talked about, is Quincy could become that pet-friendly community, you know, through these shelter services, that today we can't be that intake. We don't have the physical facility to quarantine these dogs. And so with this, that's kind of a growth opportunity that's not in existing programming today, but it's something that we looked at as saying there is a need in the South Shore for that dog intake, so that people are not doing, I mean, I had a full-on family home interview, reviewed my home, looked at my yard, vetting us out to adopt this dog, yet I could have had the option to pick her up in a parking lot in Connecticut. So I think that is something that we had talked about. I'm going to say, you know, this is what's happening as far as pet adoptions, and a lot of friends of mine have picked dogs up in supermarket parking lots on that Last Chance Highway. I mean, I think particularly you see a lot of these natural disasters out in the South, and a lot of the kill shelters are in the South, and so there's a big movement to bring these pets to the North, but there's a lot of need or a lot of desire to be adopting rescued animals.
I think another very positive aspect of all this is where the proposed shelter is to be located. It's a great location. It probably is not good for a lot of other uses, and with the open space, it has a very symbiotic relationship with the dog park, which is being funded and is already funded separately. And then to have, you know, public dog walking trails through all of the wooded and open space, it's just a whole wonderful world for animal lovers and their pets.
So I quite frequent and see many of my neighbors there over at Bear Cove and Hingham. The town of Hingham has over 400 acres of open space, a lot of walking trails. But really, should I drive a half an hour from house next to Hingham to walk my dog? I really want that, you know, our municipality to meet the needs of our residents and of our pets within the community, so that I'm not driving half an hour, like let's stay in Quincy, to do that. So I think that's a really great, and we're also talking about building out kind of pet-friendly walking trails in addition to that park space.
And with the high-rise residential buildings right there, it gives all those residents a wonderful place to walk their pets, play with them. So it just seemed to have evolved in a wonderful way, and so I think it's a dream waiting to happen.
You know, I recently, this spring, had to attend a conference in Danvers and was there for 3 days and booked around the clock, and I brought my dog. And to stay in the hotel with us was, my daughter was attending this for her, and so we were really booked solid, and the daughter wanted the dog time. So we bring the dog to this hotel, and Danvers had a dog park, and 3 times a day, that was my job, bring the dog to the dog park during this conference. And I look at it as the people who are living in the community, they're visiting our community, you know, we are very much missing this pet-friendly amenity. And a lot of us are at Swan Point Park, we go to some other areas, or you know, maybe break the rules in the Blue Hills, letting dogs off leash, but we really need a pet-friendly location within our community. So in particular, I liked the fact that we're able to partner with the different uses at the location. In 22 acres, I think what's important is a lot of times with dogs getting dog complaints, and where can we site something like this that isn't in an overly populated residential area, and we're taking land that is underutilized and capitalizing on it. The other thing, I just wanted to follow back on, when you talked, and the other thing, I guess two other things. One, you talked about kind of a pet, almost like a pet cemetery space up there, and building that into the wall. That's something you've seen other communities do. I remember this came up in meetings, it was something that fell off my radar.
And I will add, it also is a revenue generator, because people, buy those grips and they pay maintenance. So it's not only, I think it's one more way that the whole facility becomes an extension of the community, and where the hearts of people really, both physically and emotionally, can be. So it just becomes very, very symbiotic.
And there's a lot of, I've met so many people, one of my favorite events, the Cause for Paws, the Animal Shelter hosts, is October 15th, Sunday morning. It was the big Animal Shelter Dog Walk Road Race. It really gets a lot of those out there. Let me ask you on the fundraising source of things, because we are being asked to appropriate funds for $7.1 million. We have projected project costs, however, it's a bit, chicken and the egg, right? This isn't a 100% designed building. This is what we're projecting based on square footage, based on construction costs for a veterinary, shelter facility. And this may not be a question for you to answer, but maybe the mayor's office. I know that the animal shelter has privately raised funds to support this, and we're looking at some grant applications and some other private fundraising and revenue sources to offset this cost. If somebody could answer, how could that be? We could, the same way with the school building, we put the money in, we get reimbursement, we don't end up authorizing the whole bond amount. What would be the game plan for the private fundraising component? So maybe through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor's representative.
Through the chair, to the councilor. I believe there has been some initiatives, and maybe have been spearheaded with Lisa Ramola, but I would not, I don't feel that I'm well versed enough to comment on it, at least readily in. That would please the chair and please the councilor.
Right, so I guess it's just a matter of the appropriation vote would be for 7.1. If potentially funds come in, private funds, so we talked about, a facility like this is something that there's a lot of public support for. If donations were to come in, how could they be offset to reduce our cost? So we have to appropriate the funds. Go ahead. How is that going to be handled?
The component that we're looking for outside of the shelter would be for the dog park and the Stanton Foundation. That's something that we would be looking to fund separately, but the shelter itself would be a city public building at this point, and we would have to look to how to create a donation center and how to offset this cost.
So oftentimes the city annually receives gifts to the Quincy Animal Shelter. We as a city often vote on gifts that we receive and then fund support. When the animal shelter is looking to obviously is also again privately fundraising for the capital campaign. And I'm talking about the finances of bringing those funds in to offset the cost, or I don't want to put that on the director.
I know that there have been some initial initiatives
to
start that campaign, and I
Okay.
was curious if maybe Pittsburgh, the president, might know what might have been generated to date, and if there's something earmarked.
Sure. Okay. I guess I don't want to go into kind of the city financing side of that, but maybe if we could just bring Kit up very briefly. I think the talk is funds have been raised privately for the shelter, whether they're looking at this point to cover some of the amenities and the interior uses with their funds. I don't know that they're at that point, because now it's really getting real, right? We don't have the building design yet. But maybe for those at home who are looking at the price tag, saying this is a very expensive building, this is a very expensive project, for those who would be willing to invest private dollars, how could we bring those in?
I'm sorry.
So, Kit, I'm just always trying to raise funds for the animal shelter, but we have worked together on some private fundraising events for the shelter, and we began a capital campaign. I guess maybe, do you want to just give us an update as to, I want to say you had raised maybe $500,000.
Not quite.
Private?
Not yet. We are close to $300,000 that we have in an investment account. And I was just taking a quick look at, for our annual operations, we currently are running with about a $225,000 annual budget. And of that money, roughly 90,000 of that comes from our adoptions. About 40,000 currently is events, and the additional 95,000 comes from things where people are making donations. They make donations in memory of. They sponsor a cage. They, just send a check because they like us, whatever. But a couple of the places we've been able to make some progress with is a lot of the big companies offer matching gift programs for their employees. So if you donate 100, they donate 100, and therefore we get $200. And Peg O'Brien really manages that, and unfortunately, not all companies are consistent, so I think they drive her crazy, but that's been an opportunity. And we've also, as we become better known and respected, I think it's a fair thing to say, we have started probably in the last 5 to 6 years receiving some requests from people. When someone goes that we didn't even know that left us $10,000, or we had a man some years back. What? Yeah, sorry. We ultimately received. This was a man that none of us knew. We found out later that he came in several times and spoke to the volunteers, looked at the work we did and whatnot. When he passed, we ended up with his dog because, again, when people pass, they need a place. And this man left us $90,000. I mean, and that's why I always tell volunteers, you never know who you're speaking to. No one's going to come in and say, hey, I'd like to give you $10,000. It's not how it works. So those are some of the places that we have been, able to make inroads, not just to get through this year, but to start putting monies away. Some events have been earmarked for a capital program, if you will, and there are other opportunities. I would say, we fully expect to be a part of this, so.
No, that's helpful. I think, one, I know you've done that capital. We had talked about working with the animal shelter to privately raise funds. So I think there's a few different pieces, right? It's a public building. You're a nonprofit organization who partners with the city through a memorandum of understanding. You work hand in hand with the animal control department. For example, today when I toured the facility, I made a call to Officer Convoy earlier in the week on Tuesday about a senior citizen in my district who had a feral cat she brought in and could not care for. She thought it was a good idea. I'm going to take this cat in. Realized it's not a good idea. I need help. So Officer Convoy went right down. We brought that cat in. The cat got fed here today. And, so I think I wanted to talk about, how this all, comes together. But more importantly, there's opportunity. So as we're talking about the expense, there's opportunity out there now that this is getting real. We're going to design a new shelter. That you are able to go after some of these donors who are willing to step up on a higher level. Those that your own volunteers have a great events committee, and to bring in some private dollars to offset this price tag. So I feel like while we're talking about the design project moving forward, Warren, feel free to jump in here because you and I have had a lot of talk about once you decide we're building a new animal shelter and there's a capital fund set up through the nonprofit, which we have, that we're able to pursue private dollars. But until that project is real and that appropriation is set in motion, those dollars aren't showing up. So Warren, maybe if you want to talk about your experience about that.
I would love to.
Because you and I spent a lot of time, and I think this is another thing that's at your firm about, is we're seeing a price tag, you're saying it's an expensive building. We're saying it's more than just a shelter. There's a lot of municipal interest, particularly, but there is a lot of opportunity for private support.
One of the things that we get very, very heavily involved in is fundraising for these shelters, which we do at no additional cost whatsoever. And it's just amazing what can be done. People just seem to love to donate for animals today. That San Francisco project, one donor gave over $20 million. It's it's just amazing. We will create a list of donation opportunities, naming opportunities that can be used at fundraising events. So there is donations that occur during the implementation stage. There are donation opportunities during the construction. And then there are donation opportunities after the project is completed. And we also design into the facility opportunities for donations, like for instance, brick pavers that are where you enter the facility. In the IPC, the interactive corridor, engraved floor tiles. People love to do that. And
So very similar to when we just built the YMCA project, or, you know, some of the nonprofit organizations have done similar. So typically, those funds come in as the project progresses, and then can be used to offset the actual, what gets bonded out cost. And that's how you,
And then there's fundraising events that might be for individuals, community, but then there's also, you can also do corporate events for, for companies that might want to have a naming opportunity for a whole room or a whole area. So there's so many different ways that animal shelters can generate revenue through fundraising.
well, I look forward to supporting this project. I hope my dog Sydney's not watching VHD right now, thinking she's getting a doggy condo. But I really appreciate the work of your firm, to Lisa, to the project team, to Kit, to the animal shelter, and all of your volunteers. You're amazing to work with. I look forward to working with you to help raise some of these project dollars to offset this cost. And I will be making a motion. I know a lot of people probably have some questions, but I will make a motion to approve. Thank you.
Motion on the floor to approve, Council Finn.
Before, again, I guess it would be on the motion, but sir, come back up. I just have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. Is that, and again, I want to make clear, I'm generally supportive of the concept of the animal shelter. And as I understand, I just want to make it clear, this is a public facility we're talking about.
Yes.
Of many of the designs and stuff that you presented here to us this evening, are they nonprofit, or are they public, or is it a mix of
I
what?
would say half of them are private and half of them are county, city projects.
I mean, public,
Public,
basically.
yes.
Are there things that share that same type of thing with interactions with nonprofit on public
It's
space?
becoming more and more common.
All right.
And there's many reasons for that, because they both share the same support functions, so it makes it much less expensive to build.
Well, in terms of the conceptual site plan, is that included in this package that we have at all?
Yes.
Is that, what is the conceptual site plan? As you went through it, I wasn't
It's in
sure.
that- It's towards the end of those slides.
Oh, is it the one, is it this picture here with the,
Yes.
that's it?
That's just the conceptual. It shows the access road, it shows where the shelter itself will be located, and it shows the dog park.
Now, again, and I don't want to create any panic here, because I am generally supportive of this, but the thing that I'm just interested in is we have yet to do a schematic design, obviously. That has to be paid for. I mean, that's something the city repurchasing. But we have no artist rendering, so to speak, in terms of what it is, what this is going to look like
Yeah,
for us.
because it hasn't been designed yet. Like,
Right.
We have the program, we have a conceptual site plan. The next step is exactly what you're talking about.
So, but the question I ask is, to use the old expression of pig in the poke, we're being asked here this evening to vote the whole enchilada. We're asked to be vote for the cost of the entire project without seeing a single rendering, without seeing a picture, without even really having the concept. And I don't know, have you done charrettes already with the people who are interested in this, with the community that's been so supportive and come out and spoke with us? Have we done charrettes and really gotten to feel the sense of what they want to see in the design?
We've had discussions about it, and like I said, there's been a tremendous...
Discussions with whom?
Oh, well, with all of the stakeholders.
Of all the stakeholders. So we haven't had anything,
Yeah,
we haven't had anything like a public charrette thing that comes in and basically opens it up for public comment in terms of what they want, what people want to see in relation to it.
We see this as a real team effort, you know, between us and all of the, not only the people who will occupy, but with the community as well. And I would say that we would very much welcome, as the project begins to develop and evolve, we would welcome input from people and thoughts, suggestions.
I mean, again, and I appreciate that, I understand that, but I think the concern that I'm hearing on the other side is that, I mean, the question I would have, and it's really not for you, it's more for the administration, why wouldn't we just be approving the design concept at this point and the resources to do that, and then voting later in relation to the full cost of what that would be?
I mean, again, this is more of a kind of a civic thing, but I don't see any reason why you can't take this step by step, you know? And the next step might be just to see the design. And if everybody loves it, then you take the next step. I don't see any reason why you can't do that.
Yeah, so I think that what we would need to have is a sense of what that cost is, because that's what we'd be voting on to approve. And then coming back after that as part of the process to, like, again, then approve whatever the construction costs, et cetera, would be in relation to that. The other thing that I think, and this is probably not as much applicable, and I think this serves a very important function. One, because it's not just, this is really not an animal shelter, is it? This is really an animal center type thing. That's the kind of concept.
In some ways it is, because
Right.
it's not just the animal shelter, just as you say, it's a spay neuter clinic, it's animal control, and it's a canine unit, canine police unit. They're all under this same roof.
Right. So, and I think it's important that is actually housing that. I think that's excellent, particularly animal control, because I think the animal control in Quincy does an incredible job with very limited resources, and housing them is very important to me. But, you know, I keep thinking, I'm in the private nonprofit world. If I appeared before my board of directors and said, give me X amount of capital dollars to go out and do this, and I didn't have a single rendering for them, or really at that point could show some conceptual design that said this is what we're trying to do, you know, I'd get laughed out. And so what's happening here is we are overseeing, again, the public resources that go into these particular things. And if we just give it all tonight, in my mind, that's kind of problematic. I mean, I can see approving the designs. I mean, we did it with, you know, with most of the work that we've done, even with the downtown development or anything, is that people always were at least able to give us a conceptual kind of concept. And the stuff that you're proposing, I mean, it's all very exciting, but I have no idea what this building looks like right now.
I really appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think anyone's suggesting.
Excuse me, point of order.
Point of order. Joe, in the packet before through, Mr. Chairman, for the council, in the very thick packet, project overview for the Quincy Animal Shelter that's presented in our packets this evening, flip to the back and there's a 12-page line-by-line breakdown of expected square footage. So there's substantial programming. When you talk about the public charrette, there was a public charrette. I sat in on a couple of them. Lisa Moll chaired them.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm not certain what the point of order is. I think
said there's a
we're
rendering.
taking a second bite at the apple.
No, there was a rendering presented since.
Point of order,
the-
Mr. Chairman. I don't think
Page.
she's not stating a point of order.
12
She's
pages to back up your request.
Point of order, that's not, Mr. Chairman, and you have the rule, but that's not a point of order. It's an interruption. And I'm happy for you to recognize her at some point to respond to mine, but this is presently my time. And unless the honorable counselor from Ward 1 has a genuine point of order, I would ask for the ability to continue to proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, getting back to the point, I recognize that there's all types of estimates in here in terms of square footage and different things related to that. But we've walked through clearly all we have based on the checklist of the person who's responsible for this that they're indicating here has been that conceptual design, which is this. That's it. All of these pictures are wonderful that we have, but they're of other places. They're not of what's being proposed here. And I think the suggestion you make is perfectly reasonable. This is something that we should be able to do in stages, including on the financial side.
I don't think anyone is suggesting that you hop on a runaway freight train. I think this is a step-by-step process, and I can't imagine that all of you would be involved in the approval of each and every step as it progresses. You're not necessarily approving construction to start tomorrow for $7.1 million.
The minute we, quite honestly, from a civics, and you used that word before, from the civics perspective, if we approve the 7.2 million, 7.1 million, it's gone. It's gone. And our ability to influence or suggest or anything with that is essentially gone. Because what we're doing essentially is authorizing the mayor to spend those dollars. And so, again, what I think is reasonable is what are the conceptual and design costs that take us right to get that? And can we summarize those and make that a part of what we're approving? And then come back when we have those renderings and when we have that conceptual schematics and design laid out.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm perfectly happy to proceed in that, but I'm not, this is more.
Councilor, what's been done, as Councilor Forrest said, is 12 pages of a detail from an all-day session that animal control sat in on, that the animal shelter folks sat in on, and that Lieutenant Dillon and the canine unit sat in on. So that level of detail is there. Physical drawing is not available yet because those monies haven't been allotted yet.
Well, what I'm suggesting is why don't we allot those monies so that we have, and again, maybe some of my other colleagues have some view of this, but so that then we in turn, have some sense of what it is that we're buying, And again, I support this, and I want to be clear, we continue to support the concept. But, we heard Monday night the firefighters alluding to, while they're grateful for what we're passing, that we have our firefighters now in what are essentially not National Fire Protection Association certified firehouses. And we're not, as I think Councilor Paolucci had mentioned in one case, you may be rehabbing one, where in reality what you need a new firehouse. And so I know these are all about important priorities, and again, as most of you know, I'm done, but the thought to me is simply, what does it say to the taxpayer of Quincy if I'm going to just simply say, yep, here you go, $7 million. And I haven't even seen a rendering yet of what that looks like. And I know there's some people who are very enthusiastic and they support this, and I'm sure I'm going to be getting emails galore in relation to it, but I don't think it's that unreasonable. And again, that certainly also gives time. Perhaps you can answer on behalf of the administration. This also calls for a spay-neuter clinic, correct?
Yes.
Okay, who's going to operate the spay-neuter clinic?
Yeah, at this point, the discussion is being had with the animal shelter division to see if that would be something they could oversee, or if we bring in an outside party for that portion.
That requires, I'm imagining that requires some type of veterinary type of service involved with that, correct?
Yes.
All right. And is that something that could be considered even, is that something that could be licensed out in some way if we talk about revenue types of sources?
In many shelters, they actually get veterinarians to volunteer.
Excuse me, Warren, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they're having a difficult time picking you up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Many shelters actually wind up having local veterinarians that volunteer, and in a way, it's also an opportunity for them to bond with pet owners, and then they wind up coming to their vet hospitals because they have that opportunity for that interaction and meeting. So you do wind up getting a lot of local vets to volunteer for the spay neuter at no cost.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing. And of course, given the budget, and I know they've done wonderful work and great work over the years, but I think I don't think, if we're talking about the fundraising component, if you're talking about those fundraising and specific opportunities, given this is really a game changer in terms of the nature of the facility that they're having.
Absolutely.
So are we talking about those fundraising opportunities to help support the work that they do? And this is probably more of a question for the administration as well. But are we talking about those resources helping to support the city's investment in that public building?
Again,
That's not your question to answer, I realize that, but Ms. Amola might be able to.
the only thing I can tell you is that my experience has been, and it's quite considerable, that these shelters generate tremendous amounts of money through donations, tremendous.
And I have no, but again, perhaps, do you have any thought, we've talked about these being these specific fundraising opportunities, and I know the councilors have talked about trying to pay off the capital costs and perhaps in some way in relation to that, but what is the administration's view of the fundraising opportunities? Does that go to help support the very good work that the people, the nonprofit does, or are you talking about that somehow supporting the debt that we have in this building?
I think historically it has been to support the good work that they are doing to try to keep the facility in order. Any fundraising efforts that they put forward in preparation of a potential new shelter would be for, more so for, we build the facility as a city, and how do they furnish it? How do they take care of everything that goes inside of that facility? So that's been the discussion to date.
So essentially what you're saying is those fundraising opportunities would go to support the good work of the nonprofit.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Again, this has been very helpful, and I appreciate it. And again, I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying, but it just seems to me that without some kind of conceptual rendering, it becomes difficult for me to vote the full amount without having some sense of what that looks like and what that entails. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. And Warren, if you could, and I'm going to go to my colleague, Councilor Palmucci, but just to kind of bring some context to what my colleague here, Councilor Pinman, is suggesting in terms of we kind of worked through it sequentially, I think was the wording that he had used with the architectural rendering. The line item that was placed in front of us, at least, for the overall package is about $351,000, correct?
Yes, and that's actually for the entire, see, the architectural services come in phases. We've completed programming. We've completed the site, concept site plan. There is the schematic design, which is about 30% of that. There is the construction documents, which is about 55% of that number. There is the bidding and contract negotiations, which are 5%. And then there is construction administration, which is about 10%. All that adds up to 100%. So if you take the number that's there
Divide it up
and
by
divide it
percentages.
into those percentages, the schematic design is only 30% of that number.
Right, okay.
Does that-
Roughly 90
does that help?
90,000.
Right.
Yeah, that does help. Oh, the Commissioner.
Okay.
Come on, please.
In addition to the design at the conceptual level that you're contemplating, we need to advance the utilities to serve the building as well. So it sounds like we were like about 30% of that amount. We really need to add to it to advance the other design drawings at the same time.
You're all set, Council? Council Calhoun.
Thank you. Paul? The advancing the utilities, that's covered under the $800,000 of building the roadway that was previously approved under the Parks bond to build the animal park or the dog park, correct?
My understanding is those utilities and those designs were intended to the park, not specifically to the building.
So you're telling me we're running two separate lines of utilities?
I'm not
One to
saying
the
that.
park and a separate line to
I'm
the
not saying that.
animal shelter directly next to the park?
I am not saying that.
Okay, so then
There
clarify.
are utilities designed for the park. It would be a stub-out type of a situation in that design.
Right,
Then the building would be tied into.
right. So
The
when you're talking about
utilities along the
advancing the
building,
utilities,
east of the park utilities, there is a branch off of the park utilities to serve the building utilities, to the building. And those building utilities need to be designed.
so what you're saying is advancing the utilities isn't the extension of the road. The advancing the utilities is literally from the road into the building. So it's a fraction of what the costs are going to be to advance the utilities for the dog park itself, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But those, to my understanding, are already provided.
Correct, okay. I just wanted to clarify that one point. Just a couple of points that I want to make. I concur 100% with Councilor Finn. I don't see any reason why we need to approve the full $7.1 million tonight. Listen, we all agree. I don't think there's anyone up there who's disputing you guys need a new animal shelter. You guys are going to get a new animal shelter, okay? So we'll start with from that perspective. We all, I think I can safely speak for everyone, we all agree you need a new animal shelter. You're going to get a new animal shelter. It's a priority. It's before us. We've got multiple things on it. You guys are going to get it. However, we have a fiduciary obligation to the taxpayers. As you can understand, you run a nonprofit on a very thin budget. We run a nonprofit up there as well. And we're just as beholden to the people who send us here, who are our board of directors, in terms of the voters, as you are to you. So we have to make sure we're running as optimally as possible and maximizing those dollars, just as you do when you run the shelter. And you do fantastic work. You probably do a better job running that on a leaner budget than we do up here. But I would support, and I'll make a motion in a moment, but not saying that 7.1 million isn't the number that we'll end up getting to. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more, but I'm not comfortable with what I've been presented with this evening and reviewing the material. And Warren, fantastic job. I mean, I always appreciate when someone presents to us and you can tell that they love their job. I think you can really get that in your work. You can tell. You can see the difference of quality that you're providing. You know, and these, come up to the microphone. They can't hear you if you don't come up to the microphone.
Say that.
I'm just saying that we're fortunate that we really love our work, we love what we do, and I think it shows.
It's like that old adage, you can hear a smile on the telephone. When the person on the other end is smiling, you know you get that sense. And I can feel the smiles from the design packages that you've given us and from your presentation. You clearly, it means a lot to you and the love of what you do comes through. So we appreciate it. One of the other things that I think throws up kind of a red flag, or at least a pause moment for me, is the potential for fundraising. We're being requested X amount of money to build this. I'd like to know the sustainability of it. That's a big question that I have. And that's not to say that it can't be sustained, but if we're going to invest a significant amount of taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure that all the folks are in there, the different entities. So the animal shelter, the canine unit, animal control, that we have the appropriate plan, so to speak, operating manual for how this, and procedures for how this facility is going to be kept up. Because what we don't want to see is we invest all this money and then, you know, the shelter becomes run down and it sucks more money out of the taxpayer kitty here to keep it going. So the fundraising opportunities, you had said, your quote was, a new shelter like this could result in tremendous amount of donations. Great, I would love to see something from someone, probably not you, you're the architect, or you designed it, but from someone along the way in a future presentation as to how much we can expect in fundraising potential and selling bricks and dedicating areas of the shelter to donors, things like that, how much we can expect to bring in and essentially to endow this and make sure that it operates at a high level that I think we're putting a commitment into it with this vast expense of taxpayer money. We want to make sure that it's operated efficiently, operated well, and that these folks have the resources they have to operate a first-class organization in a first-class and first-rate building, which is what's being requested.
To respond to what comment you just said, to answer that, it's really probably a three-part answer. One is providing the infrastructure to facilitate and enable the donations. Second is orchestrating the events and the opportunities to take advantage of those. And then third is what is the nature of the residents of Quincy? And it comes down to how many dog and cat lovers there are and animal lovers. And a facility like this will bring those people out of the woodwork. That's been my experience for doing this for decades. And it does tend to bring people from where you never expected it.
Well, I can agree with you because it's brought people out of the woodwork to email me and call me to support the animal shelter expense. So I trust that when it, to vote for it, I've gotten more phone calls and emails about this particular project than I think I have on any particular issue in the last 5 years. So
Another thing that I can tell you, and I speak from experience, that when we have the design of this, and when we have the renderings, and we can even do 3D animated movies where you can walk around the shelter, walk into it, and look around and see everything. It's amazing what technology can do today. And you show those at fundraising events, it's just amazing. I used to be amazed. I'm not amazed anymore.
I was looking through your some of the materials you provided, and Councilor Finn asked a question, which I was going to ask as well, or touch upon. You said, he asked, how many of these are private versus how many of these are public, and private by way of nonprofit? As you were talking about them, I was Googling them on my phone, and that's what I got. It was about half. And then I was looking at, I was doing the math on my phone of the price per square foot for the samples that you included in some of your materials. Modesto, California is $175 a square foot. Bristol, Rhode Island, $245. Little Rock, Arkansas, $49 a square foot. Belmont County, $250 a square foot. We're at $300 a square foot, and I think we're not at a point yet where that number can be specifically defended based on the design, because we don't have a formal design.
You're correct. So
I kind of leave my judgment, I reserve my judgment on whether or not $300 a square foot is a reasonable amount. There's a little bit of sticker shock at $7.1 million, I'll tell you that. But if it can be justified, I'll support it. At this point, I don't see a justification for that number yet. But certainly, the need's been established, the desire to build it, I think, build something has been established. And for that reason, I'll support funding to get this started, to get the design phase, so that we can get another presentation before this body, to whereas I can say, okay, so why is it $300 per square foot? Or at that point, it might be, $299 or $305 or something else, and you can say exactly why it is. Because, we have this piece, and when you add these together, that's how you get the final dollar amount. So until we get a final dollar amount, I'm going to reserve judgment on whether or not that's a reasonable cost, $7.1 million. And in furtherance of that, I would move to amend 2017-133 by replacing the number 7.1 million with 3.550, $3,550,000 in the two sections where the amount is referenced. As justification, I'm cutting the amount directly in half. That's 50%. I think that's plenty to get started, probably far more than is necessary to go through the design phase. I don't want to hold this up unnecessarily. I think that would be a reasonable amount. Need it.
Say your point?
Do we have a motion already on the floor?
There's a motion on top of the motion. So we'll take a vote on Council Palmucci's motion to amend and see where that goes. And then Council Forrest will have the option to withdraw or we'll vote on that.
Thank you, Warren. I'm actually done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council Ian,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
on the motion.
Yes, Warren, if you don't mind coming back up here. I luckily, I wanted to say this earlier, I did not have to adopt my dog out of a parking lot. I was lucky enough to get him out of a shelter not too long ago. And, over the years, I've gone to the animal shelter multiple times with multiple family members when they wanted to get cats or dogs. And, it's not that you don't have the want in the volunteers to take in more animals, to be able to adopt out more of them. It's just, again, it's a matter of the size and capacity of the space, not for a lack of want from the volunteers and the staff that are there. So thank you for the work that you guys do. I recently was out of the hospital with my new dog for 6 hours because of an infection. And I can tell you that what made that 6 hours bearable was also the space, right? I mean, we're in essentially an animal hospital, but it's a space and then also the people that really made that 6 hours bearable. And you mentioned in here that this shelter this shelter in this building is also going to have vet care on top of the other services that are in there. So, and I might be repeating myself, but that is going to be a source of revenue for this building as well, correct? Because that hospital building is $200,000.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And you had also talked, I'm just trying to go through some cost-saving things that you had mentioned in this very thorough packet that you put together. You talked also about energy efficiency
Yes.
in a building this size, which is great, right? Because we very recently replaced the streetlights across the city with LED lights, which is a step towards cost savings in running the city. And you talked about LEED certification for the building itself, and that process is extensive. I've been through the process myself in one of the buildings we run a restaurant, and it's very extensive to get LEED certified. But the end product is that you have years and years of energy savings, for tenants and for the landlords as well. So can you just talk about whether or not this is going to move in that direction of getting LEED certified?
I believe that there are aspects of that in the program, but it's also very common for us in general to do green work, and it could be recycled construction materials, it could be solar collector panels, it could be water reclamation, in other words, taking rainwater that comes to the roof or on the parking and reusing it to wash dog runs. There are so many opportunities for good environmental stewardship, and that is actually an integral part of our work as well. And in fact, we just finished a LEED certified project in New York.
Congratulations.
At that hospital. And so this is an integral part of what we're doing. Another interesting aspect of this is that people who love animals also seem to have a mindset to appreciate environmental stewardship and environmental responsibility. So that too goes hand in hand, and it is an integral part of our work.
That's great, because, and I want to make sure that that is going to be one of the priorities when we move forward with this, because again, not only does that cut down on cost, but then the added benefit to that is that, and like my colleague said here, that the building itself is going to be more self-sustaining over the years. And that's something I wanted to also touch upon. Again, I apologize if this question was asked of you a couple of times, but you talked about how donations is a huge part of what can keep this building self-sustaining once it's built over the next 20, 30, 50 years, even more than that. You talked about adoptions, vet care, maybe selling different products for people that maybe come in, maybe go out with a $20 dog toy or something, and $30 cat battery. So you're also going to have the pet cemetery, which I imagine will come with some added revenue benefits as well. Obviously, it's too early and too soon to tell and be able to nail down exactly how much revenue we're going to get per year for this building. But you've built over 450 facilities, and in your experience, can you just speak to generally, how long does it take to cover a space this size for overhead costs and being able to, right out of the gate in that first year, cover those overhead costs?
I know that sounds like a simple question, but it's actually quite involved and complicated because there are many facets to it. Number one, it's the general staff, but then there's also volunteers who volunteer their time. And I don't know the specifics as I stand here now of how many volunteers would be working in this facility, but it sounds like from what I've heard, there are already quite a few, and they're volunteering in a facility that is seriously in need of improvement. I think that with this kind of a facility, the volunteers are going to skyrocket.
And that goes to my point that I want to make sure that they have what they need to run and operate the facility. The last thing I want any of these very gracious volunteers to worry about is, okay, we need to pay our light bill every month and we don't, have enough to pay it. Or this year in our fundraising goal, we hadn't met it and we're, short $1 million. Or I don't want that to be something that anybody needs to worry about in the shelter. And again, I know it's hard to pin that number down right now so early on, but and again, speaking to your experience, because I've never built a shelter myself, and you've built a number of them. You talk a lot about donations being a large percentage of that revenue to operate a shelter. On average, what percentage would you say donations are of the overall revenue of the building? Are we talking like 10%, usually 50%, or?
In all honesty, I really don't have that kind of statistics. But I think that, you can talk with shelters all over the country, find out. But like I said, they do generate a huge amount of revenue, not only initially, during the design and construction, but and then over the life of the project, they continue to generate revenue. And if it really does become a real beloved part of the community, those donations will continue year after year, and I've just seen that happen so often.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that too. And just so again, referring back to the packet that you had given us here, it does list out the different project phases for the proposal, and the first one is already completed, the project programming phase,
Yes.
which is 3 weeks. That's already completed. So we are looking at 3 more phases to come. Correct me at any time if I'm wrong, but there's a program design diagrams phase, the schematic design phase, and the construction documents phase. And in the page after that, you talk again about cost control and how working through these phases, you're always keeping in mind for your projects that you get the best bang for your buck, I guess you can say. And it lists here that the time to put out the bid is after the construction documents phase. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So at that point, you'd be able to really have a more exact idea of
We will
cost
be-
per square footage.
We will be able to get a reasonable cost estimate even at the completion of schematic design. And it
So
won't
after the
be-
third phase, you're saying, correct? Sorry to interrupt. After the third phase, you'll be able to
The
get
next phase,
more accurate
the next
number?
phase, which is schematic design.
Mhm.
At the completion of schematic design, we will be able to get, I think, a reasonable and quite reliable estimate of the construction cost. The absolute rock-hard number won't come until the completion of the construction documents, but I don't think there will be many surprises between the estimate we get at the completion of schematic design and the final cost estimate at the completion of the construction documents.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. And then just the last question I have, and this again goes to cost estimate. And this is also in the packet that you put together for us. The building consists of 21,000 square feet, and the preliminary calculation has 2 numbers here, one at $300 per square foot, and then one at $250 per square foot. So I'm just, and then the presentation that we're looking at today only mentions $300 per square foot. Is there a reason why the $250 per square foot is no longer
I
being
think
considered?
we're trying to be conservative and provide a number that we feel is reliable. So that's the basis for that.
But the range is still a possibility. If you're starting at, anywhere from 250 to 300, 250 could still be a possibility if we get the bid that comes in a little bit lower.
There are many factors that will determine where that number actually falls. One is the amenities, of which most of the amenities are already stipulated in the program. The next is the final selection of materials, finished materials. Some materials will last the life of the project and have very low upkeep and maintenance. You can use less expensive materials, but they may have a higher upkeep and maintenance cost, and they might have an earlier replacement cost. And the third factor is your systems, your mechanical, plumbing, and electrical systems, and the sophistication of those systems. So other than that, concrete is concrete, drywall is drywall. It's not going to change. But so those are the factors that can, in other words, there are opportunities for what's called value engineering. So as the project develops and evolves, if we're finding that it's starting to get higher than we want it to be, there's lots of opportunities to bring it back into line.
So for example, let's say we go to the point of the construction phase where we are picking out, flooring materials, wall materials, and, the benefit to that is that you pay more on the onset, but there's no maintenance at all moving forward. It's very minimal.
Yes.
Versus if we have the option of going for the lower cost per square foot at the onset with the material, but the maintenance of that is more costly over time. So at that point is when we can look at these material options and determine what the best avenue to go down is for the next, again, 30, 50 years that we have this shelter. Is that why there's that
Yes, like
difference?
the example, we often use resinous epoxy with a silicate grit for the runs, and that because it is absolutely impenetrable, will last forever, and never needs to be replaced, and provides a very, very cleanable surface and a very non-slip surface if it's wet because it's been hosed. So it's the ideal, perfect material. It's not inexpensive, but it's perfect for run floors.
I agree. I mean, I've had experiences where we've come across materials that are a little less costly on the on-front, but on the front end, but then you're paying for it with maintenance and upkeep and even replacing it later on. So it ends up being more expensive at a later date. So thank you. I just wanted to understand the difference in square footage and why we're getting a proposal on the $300 per square foot. And sorry, I know that was my last question, but I do have one more. And again, this goes to the overall cost. You guys are working with Brannigan Engineering for this project?
This is for the civil?
I'm just going through the packet that you gave me, and it was very thorough on sort of the background and the resume of everyone involved in this project. And I noticed that Brannigan Engineering was on there, so I just wanted to see if we explored other engineering firms, if you've had experience with them.
Yeah, I think that first of all, there is civil, there's structural, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, landscape. So there will be many consultants and engineers involved in the process. And as the architect, it's kind of like conducting a symphony. The architect is kind of the symphony conductor. We make sure that everybody is playing in harmony, is integrated.
And you've had the opportunity to meet with them and make sure, and the other folks around the project had the opportunity to meet with them also. I just want to make sure that everyone knows who's on the project and knows who's responsible.
Yeah, if I may, at this point in the project, Warren would do the design, and then we would include all lines and public buildings and our parks department and see what we could do as a city internally versus what we would outsource for certain aspects of the actual build. So that is to be determined. Those were some recommendations that the architects.
But you guys will be a part of that process as well when selecting who the engineer will be.
Everybody will be sitting at the table for that portion.
Thank you. I think that was it for my questions. Thank you. I appreciate your time again, Warren. I appreciate all of the work that went into this. Of course, you've been involved right on set of this, and it's very thorough, and I do appreciate it again. My only hesitation is that we've not reached that schematic design phase yet, and if there are costs that we can improve to help move the ball downfield and get to that point of schematic design, there's a more accurate number that we can all agree on and all point to. That's something I'd be looking forward to. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. The one thing is that this is a team effort, and we developed a wonderful working relationship with the representatives of Quincy, and we see that kind of cooperation with you.
I agree. Thank you.
All set, Council? Thank you. Councilor Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to empathize because I'll be honest with you, a lot of people have emailed me and called me and stopped over and said we need a new animal shelter. So today, I've been over the old animal shelter or the existing one that we have, few years ago. And to see it fresh in my mind, I went over there today and took a look a couple hours ago, right before I was getting into this meeting, to get a fresh look of how that our existing animal shelter is operating. And I will tell you, it's in bad condition over there. So there is a huge need for a new animal shelter. Now, when I'm knocking on doors out there in the public and talking about taxes and talking about different things in the city, I'll tell you the 5 main components I continuously get, and this will go back to the animal shelter, is traffic, roads, development of apartments, taxes, and parking. Those are the 5 main components that I get on a daily basis everywhere in the city. Since April, I've been out there knocking on doors. And those are the 5 main components that I get. The biggest concern that I have with this number of $7.1 million is really the oversight on this. The biggest concern that I also have is a cost overrun. Now, there's been people on the other side going, $7.1 million, that's quite a bit to chew off, starting from the starting point. I like what Councilor Finn, Councilor Palmucci have suggested is giving half. You give half of the product, $3.55 million, to get you started to build this and construct this new facility, this new animal shelter. And you can always come back to us again for the other funding and where it's going to be. My main thing is there's the cap of that 7.1. I don't want to see a cost overrun on this facility. And when we get into the different questions that have been asked tonight on wiring and all these road construction, and that costs a lot of money. If we fund over the 7.1 million to start with, there could possibly be a cost overrun on this. And we've seen it happen sometimes up here in the council, and you're caught in a position where you say, well, we can't do the project because the only way we're going to do it is they're going to go back to the well and ask for more. That's a huge concern of mine, and it's happened up here before while coming right onto the council with the situation, and I don't want to see that happen, because if we could save some of that funding and we put it towards our roads that we have out there. We appropriated $5 million last year for roads in our capital improvement plan. And you know, I'm a basic type of person where we got to continue to fund our roads over there, because we're going to get up next with the traffic concerns and what we're going to do with that. You have to strike a balance in the city today. I mean, you talked about all these animal shelters in these different towns and cities. The question I really have is there variables? Are they building like we're building in our city? And you look out the door, everywhere you look, we're constructing and redeveloping our city as we go. Do you see any of these municipalities or any of these towns or cities doing the type of construction that we're doing in our city today? Do you have an idea? Little Rock, Arkansas, there's some places in California. Do you have an idea of what they're doing in their municipality?
Well, like for instance, that Orange County project, they're actually building a whole multi-lane road to go out to this site, aside from the construction of the shelter itself. So it varies. Some of them you can access right off the road. I think the road that we come off of from Quarry Street, I think that's the only thing that needs to be worked out. I'm very confident in the numbers that's allocated for the shelter itself. I don't think there's going to be any big surprises there. The dog park has already been funded separately, so there's no surprises there. So I think, but I also, I don't necessarily disagree with, as I said before, taking this step by step and making sure that as you take each step, everybody's on board and everybody really feels good about taking the next step.
And that's what really the council's trying to do right here. We're trying to give you an allocated amount of funding to get you started. Let's get this project in order, let's get it started, and then you come back to us with the other design and the different allocation of funding, and as we go along, we can come back here and fund it again. So
actually, our next meeting, assuming this gets approved for this next step, I think is where the excitement really begins. Because I think that when you see the design for this, I think you're gonna love it. I think it has all the elements to be something truly a wonderful addition to the city of Quincy.
You know, I'm looking forward to this new animal shelter, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I just like to see more oversight. I like to see more descriptions of how much line items cost.
Yeah.
I have to stand by the taxpayer, so I have to represent them too, you know, so there's a give and take here. Let's get this, I'm gonna be in support of getting this project started and getting this new animal shelter. It's just that the costs, I wanna be able to see line items and see how much each step costs, because that's important to the taxpayers out in the city.
I don't see any problem with that.
That's it for me, that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council. Council Hughes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you for coming this evening, and I just have to, express my support for this project. I've gotten, like many of my colleagues, several emails about funding this project and folks across the city being in support of this. And while I don't have animals myself, I'm looking forward to taking my kids down to adopt an animal when this is built and completed, when they can actually walk the dog around the park. My kids want one. I'm like, you can't leave the house by yourself yet. So I'm looking forward in the coming years to doing that. And like I said, I'm incredibly supportive of this project. I think it's important. I think the conditions there now are not appropriate. They're not sustainable. And certainly you've done some tremendous work in other communities. So I mean, great support of the project. Now, I just want to go back. It sounds like you don't think there are going to be any major surprises on line items, so that this total of 7.1 you feel somewhat confident in.
Yeah, I think, like I said, as far as the building itself, I think that what we're...
Could you just move up just a little closer? Thanks.
As far as the building itself, I'm very confident that we can stay within that budget. The only thing that, and like I said, the dog park is already funded. That money has been donated, so that's not an issue. And so the only thing that needs to be worked out is the access road off of Quincy Street to the shelter. I think that's the only unknown at this point, but it's not like a 10-mile highway. It's a short road.
Okay, and so again, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't want folks listening at home to think that this number is just off the wall, something that's not been contemplated or calculated. And I do appreciate the detail in the presentation regarding some of those line items for the building costs. And I appreciate the concerns of the public as well as my council colleagues at maybe, not putting the brakes on, but just taking a step back and taking this a little bit more piecemeal. It sounds like that's something that you're endorsing there from the podium. So a lot of good work in this presentation and this proposal. And, again, I'm incredibly supportive of this project. And I also understand some of the voices saying to just let's wait and see to make sure that some of these estimated costs, which sound like a good estimate from someone who's got years and years of experience and who's put the numbers together on this and seen what is appropriate, but getting us some renderings so that we can just verify that again, being stewards of taxpayer dollars. So
I can well and appreciate your wanting to see what it is you're funding.
understood. that makes so much sense.
It's like, it's like going to an auto dealer and saying, well, I want to buy a car, can I see it?
You're right. I know. Some I wished I had seen a little bit closer.
Well appreciated, and I think, as I said, taking a step-by-step approach should be fine.
Thanks very much for your time this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam President. Council Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you for all your hard work. And I, myself, I believe that and support the project. As a ward councilor, we feel the pulse of the people in my ward, and I'm sure the other ward councilors do too. And the negatives didn't exist as far as this project is concerned. And it's gotten plenty of newspaper, plenty of news, people know about it. I guess a week from Monday, we will vote for whether it passes or not, so my board will have the opportunity to really have the opportunity to let me know what they feel. But I have to tell you, the other night, when I was here, there was a lot of people that were in favor of it. And then there were people who were sitting in this audience who had the opportunity not to speak on behalf of it. And those people didn't get up and speak. So if they have the feel, and these people from my ward, if they have the pulse that this is a good project, I believe it's a good project. Now, as far as piecing it, I can understand we should see the end result, what's going to be the end result, but we certainly can't say, well, we're going to look at it halfway, and then if we don't go along with it, we're going to stop it, because then that's a disaster. And we've seen that happen here before. I'm in favor, 1,000%, of a new animal shelter, and I myself will support it. I will support my ward who has asked me to support it. If I hear any differently over the next week or so, I certainly will rethink things. But right now, I know the people in Ward 6 have asked me to support this project. And thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Council Harris. Just, it's okay, kind of wrap it up a little bit with the amended motion that's on the floor, which is to amend the appropriation to reflect $3,550,000. And like many of my colleagues here this evening, Warren, I spent some time kind of digging through the math and economics. I had the privilege of going down and spending some time with Kit last Friday. And it's funny because you were sharing earlier that story about always offering an optimal customer service experience. I was dressed in street clothes and you and I were chit-chatting and you were like, look really familiar, and I told you to sit here. I guess it was, the forehead was disguised, so it wasn't as like out in public. But I really do believe that if you want to get a full, or somewhat of a full understanding of like what you're voting on, that field trip to me was worth its weight in gold, sincerely. And I know that, noticed and now know that you guys do a lot of work with little resources. So I see that there's a defined need for a new animal shelter, no question. That building, it needs help. As I sort of come through here, and I agree with the sentiment. Folks that know kind of me and how I process things. I'm a math guy. I'm a finance guy. That's what I do in my day job. And, I always am looking out, looking at the bottom line and what that means to the folks I represent, who many of which are senior citizens on fixed income. So those are things that I take into serious account, regardless of any spending method. So, as I kind of went through the economics of what was proposed here, I did notice that in the sort of preamble, if you will, of this proposal, you had talked about, cost structure. It was cost structure was the word used, or cost control, and how cost control was always done, pretty much right now through this conversation, through your development and putting or bringing to fruition proof of concept.
Starts with programming.
What is it?
It starts with programming.
With programming.
And then we just continue to grow and evaluate and look at each thing
job description, particularly in, you know, this role when we sit in the finance committee. So as you go through, you know, what you do with the design phase, is it safe to say that when you come back for us, that you only present us with multiple tracks that have different cost figures, or is it just, you know, singular focus and this is it?
The next thing that you would see is going to be the entire schematic design. You will see floor plans, you will see exterior elevations, you will see a more developed site plan, you will see 3D renderings, color renderings. So you will really see the building as it will be, and you'll have a very clear
In
understanding.
one single fashion, correct? There won't be multiple iterations that,
Yeah.
so you will be presenting the $7.1 million concept, correct?
Basically, yes.
Well, right, you will.
Yes.
So that's something to, please.
There.
Yeah, please.
Right now, all of that information from the program development session sits flat on these 12 pages.
Yep.
So everything is there. I'm a visual person. I want to see a 3D too.
Yep.
I said to Warren up front, where is my 3D? Well, to do that, we have to lift it off of the page. All of the detail is
I
there.
did.
So that's where the $7.1 million comes from.
Yep, I saw the conference rooms and the intake rooms and the
Correct.
car wash and, you know, the drug, I saw it all. I mean, I read it.
Great, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, I did kind of spend some time on it and also looked at, you know, your portfolio, just to get an understanding. I don't have any experience with this, you know. And, I noticed that your firm had, correct me if I'm wrong, had a project out in Salem, Mass.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, was it Northeast,
Northeast and we redid all of their cat playrooms, and
Those cats don't want to leave.
yeah, it's funny because the director of the shelter said, you know, you guys really screwed up here. You know, these cats that just don't want to leave, and the whole idea was for adoption.
So like, is that somewhat of a comparative, because I couldn't see the actual sort of breakouts? Was Northeast comparable to what Quincy is trying to accomplish?
Well, that was a very small little project. It was just their cat. I think a project that might be more similar, although a little bit smaller, is the Bristol, Rhode Island animal shelter. I think that's more, it's the ground up, like Quincy, has animal control, has the small interactive corridor, has the canine cottage. So it has a lot of the features that are programmed into Quincy.
So, and again, the math, I think it was about, we'll call it 8,000 square feet, about $2 million, roughly.
I don't have the numbers at the top because we've done hundreds of these.
Yeah, no, understandable, like I said, but those were the two, I believe, local.
I mean, those are two very close, you know, each within hour and a half of here.
Again, I mean, I think I was just looking for a comparative because, I mean, again, I go down there, I spend some time with it, an animal lover myself, through and through, and know that building needs, you know, help.
I mean, you can also go to our website and look at many projects there.
You gave us a pretty good, this was a really good report, extremely helpful, I think. Just one man's opinion. But, you know, when we consider sort of just the structure in general, the reason, tell me if I'm wrong, okay, you can just even shake your head. The reason that the city, or a city or town would have an animal shelter is because we have an animal control officer. Is that kind of how it works, or?
Are you asking why there's a shelter?
Well, like how the shelter just comes to, how a shelter comes to.
Well, a city like Quincy has to have an animal control facility. A city like Quincy has to have an animal control facility. Surrounding towns, Braintree, Weymouth, Cohasset, they all have different degrees of, they all have animal control officers. We are big enough as a city that we can't just have an officer and no place for the animals to be. So the current building we're in was built by the city of Quincy to be used strictly by animal control. We had nothing to do with it. This was back in '89. And my understanding is that they would hold dogs for 10 days, try to adopt them out, and they otherwise would euthanize them. And they did nothing really about adopting cats out. It was, they just all were euthanized. So 10 years later, after that building was open, a couple of local people approached the city, animal control, and said, how can we make this no-kill? How can we help? And that's really, Don was saying today at Convoy that they started in '98 and Quincy Animal Shelter, Inc. was incorporated in November of 1999. So everything that structurally was there because the city felt, at that point had the need to do that. I think as I mentioned to you, everything we're doing in that building is not what that building was originally intended to be. Everything's been retrofitted. We squeeze every ounce out of every corner that we can. But you just wouldn't build it the same way today. So whether we're involved or not, the city has to have a provisionary thing for animal control, especially with, Quincy's just growing and growing. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I just, again, I try to get as factual as possible.
Yeah.
I don't do it every day, but I obviously want to collect as much data. And that field trip was, like I said, that was a reference.
Enlightening.
It was, absolutely, yeah.
Anytime. Come down and visit.
So the northeast component, I know that some of the councilors have raised it here this evening. I just did a little bit of digging on it. There wasn't a ton to dig on, but I believe it was like in the $8 million, I said range roughly. And I believe that about 3.5 of it they had applied for, and this is only as good as what's out in the marketplace, but they had applied for and received some sort of grant fund. So I almost wonder now, you chatted about this a little bit in the beginning, now that we're, something we're going to move forward with some sort of, call it seed money, right, to move the concept forward, do we become much more attractive to grant resources? Obviously, private fundraising is a different animal, unintended to its own, but
There are a number of organizations that do fund and contribute to animal care facilities. And I think you're right. I think Northeast did receive funding for that feline project.
yeah, I believe it was 3.5, and then they had said, and I don't know how successful they were or were not, but they were embarking on, I believe it was like $5 million fundraising where they were auctioning off, naming drones, literally everything. I don't know where it ended up, but I do know that that they qualified for some alternative resources, which is obviously advantageous and certainly helps keep the the burden off the taxpayer. Right. So you think that potentially we may be in a position.
Yeah, and that's not even to speak about some of the other things like solar energy, things like that provide all of the electric power for the facility. So there's so many opportunities to make this, instead of a drain on the tax base, might actually become a profitable venture.
Right. I don't really, that word drain of the tax base. It's a needed entity. I just, again, the way that I'm wired, and sometimes it drives my wife crazy, is that everything in moderation. Right? I know Councilor Bowen had said, I'm a big road guy, right? Fix the road guy and invest in the schools. And, the priority list is never ending.
If you look
really carefully at the program that was developed for this, line by line, item by item, I think you will find there isn't one irresponsible line item. There's no Taj Mahal aspects to this. The program is very clear and very directed to what is in the best interest of these animals, the caretakers, and the visitors from the surrounding area.
Sure. No, I completely can understand that, just in terms of like the space. So I guess the one question I don't know, kidded shared with me on shared it with me on the tour. Current animal shelter is square footage wise, it's like 2,000, 2,300,
Currently, about 2,600.
2,600. 2,600. I'm just taking down some notes as well. 2,600 in the proposed would be about 84 roughly, right?
I'm sorry?
Just the shelter component.
Oh,
It is 8 something.
it's
Yeah, that's correct. I'm just trying to verify the numbers that I wrote them down. So about 8,400. So the increased space for the animals is roughly 4 times what we're doing now. The will, yeah, as proposed.
Yes.
Okay. Just, like I said, I want to get a full understanding. I read it, but seeing things and kind of talking through with people that know, like yourself, much more than I do, helps me to get a full understanding. But it sounds like we may be in a very unique position, with some money to move forward to potentially secure some alternative funding resources as well, right? Yes. Okay. With that, is there any further discussion on the amendments to the order before us? All right. So the amendment before us, sorry? Oh, yes.
Double back, thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. To Lisa, through Mr. Chairman, to Lisa Mola. Lisa, we've seen renderings, and previously in meetings, we've seen kind of more concept renderings. They're not a hard design, what to expect, but we have had renderings presented to us, the committee. Oh, right? It was a mocked-up version of kind of a, I've seen the corridors of here's where the, animal control will enter, here will be where the canine will enter, here will be the wings. And we have presented to us months ago, I wouldn't say 6 months ago. It's been a while that I've been at any of the committee meetings, but we've definitely seen, here's the spokes and here's the access, here's the dog parks, here's the interior, courtyard, here's the dog park where it's going to be. What happened to those?
What we have developed is, as I said, the conceptual site plan.
But that's much more, what I've seen is much more on the renderings, is much more than what's in this packet. Now, these are very thick, great packets, but the pictures of, you've drilled down substantially in the programming. How much square feet, what are the needs are? There's opportunity for value engineering. Whether this entire complex needs to be 21,000 square feet is the next thing to be determined, right? So the animal shelter says, our desire is to have 9,000 square feet, and the animal control says, our desire is to have X amount of square feet. You map something out with a site overlay. I think the last time I sat with you on was in the mayor's office with these conceptual plans, right?
Conceptual site plans.
Yep.
I think maybe what we've tried to do is show you examples, renderings.
But
or
scoped out to our
photographs
size.
Of other similar facilities to show you, what each of the components might look like.
We've seen, Lisa, if you could, what the one that I'm particularly talking about, because I'd love for this body to see that, is there's kind of a U-shaped in the middle with a kind of spoke off at the end that the animal control, because when they're bringing pets in, they have to be quarantined, had a vehicular access, they wanted the vehicle to pull inside with a garage door. You've seen something. That is something that we have seen.
Based on similar size.
Based on similar size. I'd like a you and I can maybe talk offline, but I'd like to provide copies of that at this point to this body, because that was something I expected, that I've seen in the past, that I was expecting to see tonight. As far as square footage and construction costs, Warren, you've done 450 shelters. You have hard construction numbers that these are based off of. We have 12 pages of detail of broken down programming. Now, the next step, my understanding was, the animal shelter said, hey, we'd like 8,000, and everyone gave their wish list, was to hone down and say, now it's about budgeting and value engineering, whether it's going to be a $7.1 million animal shelter, whether it's going to be a $5 million animal shelter, whether what that project cost is going to be, was our next step to determine based on what those needs were determined through that 12-page broken down, however many lines programmed budget, right? We had very specific, this is the square footage, this is the cost associated with these programs, and we have a lot of data as far as this program component was built out at all these other shelters. We have hard numbers. I don't want anyone to think these are hypothetical. When you talk about the numbers, if you incorporate every single thing on the requested list, that 12-page document, you have a hard budget number for construction, correct? This isn't loose, this isn't, we left something on the table, we forgot something, we need a contingency. We have very hard data based on that. I don't feel that was strongly communicated, and I know that I had the opportunity to sit in through some other meetings where, sitting in the mayor's office, that was the level of detail we went into. And I think that that was the level of detail that this body is looking forward. So I think at this point, I'd like to see that provided to us probably prior to the next finance committee meeting. I think we have this fiduciary responsibility. We understand this construction cost. We know that there's a step as to the scope of the building. This is the potential size of the building. We understand what the budget is, and maybe not everything is going to get funded, and there's work to be coming down offline or private funds to be coming in to offset. But I'd like to see, we really went through that, and I did not see that in the presentation. We saw a lot of other elements from other projects, but we had talked about, with this programming size, a concept that I feel I'd like to provide to this body. So Lisa, if you could follow up on that, that would be terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My pleasure, Council. Any further, Council Finn?
I know the suggestion, or it's been suggested by a couple of councilors in terms of things being loose, and I don't know where that suggestion is coming from, because it is, your presentation was incredibly professional, and the numbers and the particular things that you laid out have been excellent. My suggestion for doing it in stages was more for us to have a better conceptual understanding of what ours is going to look like, and which we kind of agreed the concept of doing it in stages is reasonable enough. I just don't want to leave anybody, I just don't want to be thinking that we're moving this because of the inadequacy of what you presented to this point, because you haven't. It's fine, and I want to be perfectly clear about that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the order as amended? Let me read it in full. Council Order 201-33 appropriation as amended. For the amendment to read $3,550,000 for a new sandwich.
I'd like to hold this more information that was just requested. So we can hold it before we vote on this next meeting. So we get requested information that Councilor Flowers asked for before we move forward. You mentioned that to me earlier. That I could be. But when we had our discussions, you said people could ask for more information. That's what we were looking for before we vote on this.
So your request is not.
Absolutely.
And this is
Councilor Flowers just asked.
Yes, Council? You have more?
Again, I think we have a motion on the floor, and again, quite honestly, with all respect to my colleagues, that is not what we're looking for at the end of the day. And again, we're looking for a full conceptual layout as being a condition for our vote. So, and again, a motion is on the floor.
Councilor Maida, do you have any further? Clark?
Yes.
Council Finn,
Yes.
Council Harris, Council Hughes. Yes. Council Lawrence. Council Leeang. Yes. Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Chairman Crowe.
Yes.
It passes.
Motion passes as amended. That's 6-2. Yep. So now before us is the actual amended order or appropriation for $3,550,000 for the new animal shelter. Please call the roll.
Council Vaughn.
Yes.
Council Finn,
Yes.
Council Harris,
Yes.
Council Hughes. Yes. Council Lawrence.
Yes.
Council Leeang.
Yes.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Chairman Crowe.
Yes.
7-0.
Passes as amended. 7-0. All right, well, thank you, team, for your time this evening, and obviously the members that came out and members of the shelter, and Lisa, everyone for the hard work. Next item on the agenda is Council Order 2017-134, appropriation of $2.7 million for land acquisition for the St. Mary's School. I believe that Solicitor Clinton will be our
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I'll be reviewing the prior material with you, but I'll be brief knowing you have the next matter, a fairly involved traffic study. We put before you a purchase and sale agreement negotiated with the Archdiocese of Boston for the acquisition of what's left at the old St. Mary's School site. The mayor became aware that that site was available. The Archdiocese at the time was looking at either a sale or a land lease. As you know, the mayor's been very involved with the public school system and the condition of the buildings. And back in the early 80s, under Proposition 2.5, two schools, the Gridley Grind and the Willard School, both closed in West Quincy. And since that period of time, those neighborhoods have not been served by a neighborhood school. The mayor and the superintendent and the school committee have discussed this issue, at least conceptually, because students now are bused predominantly to Montclair School. So the goal here was to secure a site that would be available down the road. This is not a short-term project. There are other projects in the pipeline for the school system. But to secure a site that would not otherwise be securable, given the dynamics in play with the Archdiocese. So I provided you with a copy of an appraisal that we had done. That was completed in March of 2016. The conclusion at that time with our appraiser was that the land we were targeting was worth just under $2.5 million. That gave us a number to begin to work with the Archdiocese, and we did so. We concluded at $2.7 million, which I'll point out to you if you follow the documents that I provided from our own resource, the assessor's office. The city of Quincy has carried the same land at a value in excess of $3 million in the last 2 years. It was valued at $2.998 in 2014, 3.25 in 2015, and 3.26 in 2016. So when you do the 3-year averaging of what our assessors have valued this property at, it's $3.17 million. We're under agreement, under contract, to acquire the property for $2.7 million. So I provided you with that document. We're asking precisely for the funding that is required to acquire the property. In discussing this with Councilor Palmucci, in whose ward the property is located, one of his concerns was he wanted to make sure that the council order and the acquisition price matched up exactly, and they do. And the goal here is the site will have some use to the city during the construction for Sterling. Public buildings may potentially use the site, so it's going to have use during the short term, and then there's some discussion of various uses. And then in the longer term, we anticipate going forward with a school project. So that's the purpose of the funding, and we ask that you move this forward.
Any
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Solicitor. You know, what's the Mark Twain saying about, land not making it anymore? I think this is it's a reasonable effort by the administration to secure a future site of the school. When the mayor first came up with the idea or the thought to potentially do it, he contacted me. I contacted some neighbors who live on Crescent Street, and the general feeling was that it was a school before. I mean, you can't find too many spots where you're talking about a future school that in the past was already a school. So it's not like you're dropping some new use into a neighborhood. I'm sure folks have gotten used to less traffic there, but you have the church there. It's not a use that's so unreasonable for the area. I think it makes sense. It's a big number to buy land, but I think it makes sense given the projections of enrollment for the future that we need to do something to secure some space for our future needs. I'm in support of this. That, as a solicitor noted, the only concern I had is it's been our practice when purchasing land the past couple of times to set a price and then have the administration come back to us after set an expenditure and amount and have the administration come back to us with the specific price that they negotiated. I think we did that in one of the parks bond issue when we were purchasing land and then a prior purchase, which is what the solicitor was talking about. I had suggested amending it to include language that says the administration must come back for final approval. But he rightly pointed out that this whole process is past that point. There's a purchase and sale, there's an appraisal, there's an assessed value, all of it right there at this amount. So this is the amount. So this would be the one bite at the apple, so to speak, for this particular purchase. I'm comfortable with it. I felt like that was worth explaining because I think in the future when we purchase land, this body should always ask the administration to come back with the final price, so we know what the final price is. We approve the final price. This happens to be the final price in this particular matter, and I would move approval of positive recommendation, 2017-134.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke a little bit about this the other night about the school committee and the need for the St. Mary's acquisition for the kids on the other side of West Quincy, on the other side of the highway. Just to give a little bit of numbers of what's going on here in the city, being on the school committee 4 years ago, we have an influx of kindergarten students that are coming into the city, and the need for another school or a building of a new school, the Sterling Middle School, and a new, hopefully, acquisition of this. I'm going to give you some numbers of 2008 to 2018. And this will also alleviate for the influx over at Lincoln, Hancock, Marshall, and Montclair. Right now, as we speak, the children that live on the other side of West Quincy, the Grove Street area, the Shaman, Gridley, that pocket back there, they're getting bused over to Montclair Elementary School. That's quite a bit of a ride to go over there in the morning congestion with all our traffic. So this will alleviate those parents that are in their vehicles going across the city to Montclair. It'll alleviate from buses going across the city to go to Montclair Elementary School. These are the numbers that I have. 2008, Lincoln Hancock was 442 students. Today we have 523 students. We're up 81 children in the last 10 years. at Lincoln Hancock is a K through 4 configuration. Montclair, 2008, 332 children. Today, we have 413 children. That's another addition of 81 students over the last 10 years. And the Clifford Marshall School is 2008 was 541 students. We're at 564 now. It's 23 more children in that school. So we've seen some numbers increase over the last 10 years in these schools. We need to alleviate what we're doing in the city. Children, there's a little bit of a second baby boom that's happening in the city of Quincy today. So we need to alleviate this, and this is a proactive approach to what we're foreseeing down the road for children in the city of Quincy. It's a great place to live. We're doing reconstruction. We're revitalizing the city. We're going to be taking care of traffic concerns and roads in a minute after we get done with this. But our new Sterling Middle School will be constructed for 430 students. Today, we have 355. So we'll be adding an extra 75 students in that school. So this will alleviate from what is going to be happening in the future for our children. And we need to have a first-class system throughout the city of Quincy, throughout the whole state of Massachusetts, if we're going to be going into the next sphere of things. So I think this is very important. It's in Council Palmucci's ward. We've done some road repairs on Hall Place and Crescent to alleviate this, a little proactive approach to possibly acquisitioning this and doing another elementary school. I have been in contact with some representatives from the school committee, some representatives from the school department, and it looks like we're above on time and on budget for the Sterling Middle School. So it looks like it's the right timing for this. This is very important for the city of Quincy and our children. So far, what I hear is St. Mary's acquisition will either be a K through 4 or K through 5 configuration, because the Sterling Middle School is a 5 through 8 configuration. So I'll be in full support of this. This is very important for the city of Quincy, and I'll be moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor.
Yes, just a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yeah, one very quick question on the agreement of purchase and sale. There's language in here about parking. It says the seller shall reserve the right and easement to use to be determined parking spaces on the property for holy days of operation, feast, weekend masses. Is that going to be a sort of case-by-case basis on how many parking spaces will be used?
What paragraph are you in?
This is number 16.87 on page 23 of the agreement. Parking is such a hot topic for every neighborhood and every corner of the city. So I'm just trying to get a feel for what our parking arrangement is going to be with the seller. Out in scoping the building, that we are mindful that there could be crossover of events and people being in school, that we want to be mindful of that overflow as well. So I understand why it has to be determined now. I just ask that we be mindful of that moving forward, getting to the final number of what that's going to look like.
Are you saying getting to the cost?
No, but the number is going to
parking
like for the
spaces.
parking spaces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I know you don't have that number now. I'm not asking for that number now. I'm
Yeah,
just,
we would need it there.
yeah. I'm just saying that that's something we do need to be mindful of with parking being an issue everywhere in the city. So, thank you.
Like Montclair School and Wollaston School, I know of those two. They're used as poll sites, and on election day, the teachers park in a certain area. There's parking within the school grounds during those particular days. And this type of agreement contemplates something like for 9 o'clock mass. I mean, it's not going to be a dense parking impact over the course of the whole day. So we thought it was very workable when we discussed it. I'm sure it will prove to be.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion, Mr. Timmons. I see the value in this. I would say it represents some of the aforementioned schools, particularly Hancock, Marshall. I know are certainly growing and expanding. And I think that having served on the school committee, but just as a casual observer, I think for all the exercises, obviously, to deliver a solid educational curriculum with a very tight class size and tight immediate flow. So this will help achieve that. I just had one question, because I noticed the order was 2.7, And I don't know if you have the spreadsheet that was given to us in the beginning, I was just kind of looking at it, but it said 2.4. I don't know if that was just a typo.
What spreadsheet do you have?
This is the 2017 CIP mass goals.
Well, that might have been, you know, the projection at the time. I'm not quite certain. And it's got to be a scrivener's error on the CIP master list because this is a standalone item and we have the purchase price and E&S matched up with the council order. So I'm not certain why that says 2.4 other than the scrivener's error.
Interesting. I saw it, I wanted to ask. Any further discussion on Council Calhoun's motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Council Vaughn.
Yes.
Council Finn.
Yes.
Council Harris. Council Hughes. Yes. Council Rose. Yes. Council Yang. Yes. Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Jim Cole.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the Council Order 2017-135, which is an appropriation of $2.3 million for traffic, bicycle parking, and pedestrian safety master plans and traffic improvements. Joining us this evening is Mr. Coffey. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Council, for hearing me. Based upon input that we received from the Mayor's Office, from you city councils, as well as from the engineering, we redirected our prior plan from a traffic, parking, pedestrian, and bicycle analysis to a plan more focused on delivering some near-term traffic flow and safety improvements, and also on qualifying the city for state and federal grants to pay for those programs. We have a new program. We're very, very excited about it. The dollars that we're requesting with the appropriation of $2.3 million. The initial AECOM components, or their proposal, will be $525,000 of that. That's engineering work up front to qualify us for grants and federal money. And they're here to talk about that tonight. Construction and design, we're allocating $1.575 million. That'll be to do some of the work, our share of the cost to pay for some of that work over the next several years. And then future technical assistance is $200,000 for some other engineering costs that are defined in this model. Our goal, and I really want to be clear, this is to qualify the city of Quincy for state and federal funding that can be used for these traffic flow, pedestrian safety, and bicycle travel improvements for the city of Quincy. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Aiden Bond, and they can go through the PowerPoint, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Sir, thank you, Mike.
Dave Derrick is here from AECOM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councilors. Thank you for having us. We've provided a brief presentation that I think is in the package to identify some details of our phase one or stage one plan for some of the issues that were part of the RFP for a comprehensive plan that was led by the city probably 10 months ago, and our proposal was selected to move forward. So what we've done in this presentation is a copy there just of the front sheet of the 300-page RFP proposal that we provided. A very brief discussion of our qualifications as an engineering and architectural firm. AECOM is an international firm. We have 90,000 people worldwide. We've highlighted our traffic engineering and transportation planning expertise in Massachusetts. We have over 200 engineers and planners that are focused solely on traffic, parking, pedestrian, bikeway, that sort of work within close community distance to Quincy here. We have proven expertise with many municipal clients, state clients as well, doing this type of work. We've added team members to fill in some of the expertise that we feel is necessary. Green International affiliates for complete streets and traffic operations. Bill Scully from Green International is here with me tonight if there are any questions that pertain to those elements. We also have a public outreach consultant with Gina Miller Associates and a bike and pedestrian sub-consultant on our team, all the planning. What we have for you tonight is just a brief discussion of how we'd like to jumpstart the program that we responded to with focus on complete streets, roadway safety audits, which is a safety element, and signalized intersection analysis to address some of the congestion that is exhibited in the city today. And as Mr. Coffey pointed out, our goals in this first phase are to set the city up to qualify for state and federal funding, to have some measurable and obvious projects that improve traffic flow, pedestrian and bike safety, and to identify some near-term fixes that will improve conditions in the short term in the city. We have a brief definition of the Complete Streets program. It is a masked-out program. It is a design element that includes all manners of modes of transportation. So walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. And the design elements incorporate all of that. No more just the road for the cars and forget the pedestrians, the cyclists, and others. So that's the essence of the program. With Mascot, it's a 3-tier program, and what we envision working with the city on is this 3-tier program. The first tier is to implement a complete streets policy for the community, and that's a policy statement that we will develop with the city, with council, and other interested parties, using Mascot guidelines that basically is your commitment to providing that type of design in your roadway improvements. The second part of that policy, of the program, is to develop a prioritization plan, a citywide plan that identifies critical locations that you would like to include and prioritize for eligibility for funding. And these two items are approved first by the city and the council, then they're sent to MassDOT for their approval. Once those approvals occur, the city will be eligible to submit projects for construction funding up to $400,000 per project. And there is a cycle that's on the next page that shows basically the dates and deadlines for applying for these various tiers of the program. The Tier 1 Complete Streets policy is an ongoing thing that you can submit to MassDOT. And then the prioritization plan, funding, and construction application funds are twice yearly. The benefits to the city are, as Mr. Coffey pointed out, to A, qualify for planning and construction funds, design and construction funds, and also to move forward with prioritization plan for your critical locations within the city. We think that's the number one priority of the items that were included in the plan that we provided as our response to the proposal to jumpstart things and become eligible for funding for the improvements. The next component that we think is valuable are road safety audits. And those have been done at some locations here in the city, at some critical locations. Again, it's another MassDOT program. Those safety audits are typically done with the public safety officials in town, with MassDOT district folks, and with other interested parties. They usually cost about $10,000 or so per location, and once those are done, you submit them again to MassDOT for approval, and it allows the city to become eligible for a different funding source, the Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. During these roadway safety audits, a number of recommendations are made by the engineers, by the public safety officials, short-term, mid-term, long-term, and small dollar, medium dollar, high dollar value. So there's a matrix of projects and prioritizations. We've taken a look at some locations. There are a number of locations in the city that we think are ripe for performing roadway safety audits so that we can get into that program, identify some improvements that we can then apply for funding for. Again, some of the improvements can be implemented in the short term without the state funding. So there's a balance that we would like to strike in order to show progress and do something that isn't just a plan that sits on the shelf, that we can get out there and do something that's noticed by everyone. So that's among the reasons that we think that the safety audits are another early component of the program. The next item that we've prioritized, the signalized intersection inventory and analysis. This was a specific component of the RFP. There are over 200 signalized intersections in the city, and the idea is to have a comprehensive database of what the hardware is, what the operations are, where there might be deficiencies, and to be able to prioritize those so that we can identify locations that may need improvements or investment before something breaks, before the lights go to flashing, before the floods get to the conduit, that sort of thing. So this is envisioned as an inventory of both operations and of hardware and physical assets. And then finally, outreach workshops. I think our program, the overall program, envisioned over a period of time that we defined as maybe a 3-year period, meetings in each of the wards, workshop sessions to hear what folks' issues are with traffic, with vehicle traffic, with sidewalks, with pedestrians, with bikes. Everyone drives, everyone has their issues, and you all live here, and we want to hear, from the people who experience those conditions, what's most important to them. It's usually an open forum workshop thing where from 4 to 8 or something, so that we can get people that are in town that need to leave town, or people that are out of town working to come, and basically point at an aerial, point at a map, point at their house and say, at this location, there's there's almost an accident every day, whatever their impressions are. So we get a sense of what we should focus on as we move forward through the program. And then finally, as Mr. Coffey pointed out, we, in discussions with the staff today, we're told that we should have a separate fund to respond to quick items that may come up, quick issues, or elements that are suddenly a priority to the city, to a board, to the councilors, so that we don't have to go through another process, that we can get a call from Mr. Coffey's office or from the city. We have a problem, we'd like you to take a look at it. Can you give us a scope and fee for that? And that fund, that $200,000 is envisioned as most of it is, as a fund that we would like purchase, scopes, these purchase orders, and draw from to address these issues. And then finally, the last page we have is our proposed year one budget for these items. These are estimates. What we expect is that as we move through, if we receive the funding, as we move through, we would have requests from the city to provide specific man-hour cost breakdowns for the actual elements. And those will be approved by the city before we can. And that is the end of my brief presentation. I'm happy to field any questions.
Councilor Hughes?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much. This is, I just want to commend the administration as well as Mr. Coffey for putting this together this evening and thanking them. This is very thorough, and I appreciate your input here. This is certainly something that we need in the city desperately as we grow, but and as development really starts to encroach on our neighborhoods and creates, and technology and different apps and things also start to make their ways into our neighborhoods in not previously anticipated ways. So this is much appreciated, and it's great. A question for you, and I realize that this is more traffic related. Is there a parking component as well, or we didn't really talk. I assume parking is sort of encompassed within this, and then I have another question about the parking, if you could answer that.
I think, as you mentioned, inherent in any of this, in any of these exercises, these designs or studies, is parking. Certainly, at the site-specific or location-specific, as a component at that specific site. The RFP that we did respond to did also include a parking component. We have the qualifications to do that, whether that's studying parking programs within the neighborhoods, sticker parking, whether there's time of day restrictions on parking. We have the capability to do all that, on request. I'm sure that once we get into the workshops, we'll hear about that. We've read articles in the paper, and we've heard from staff certainly that parking is an issue in the city, and we have the folks to address that, and can draw from the account upon request to address those concerns.
Great, that's great. I just wanted to follow up with just something that you said, which I always talk about with folks in the different neighborhood meetings or when I'm talking to people about individual parking issues, is a sticker program, and how, just to clarify to folks, that we don't have a resident sticker program in the city, and we have no mechanism to sort of enforce that here in the city. What we do have is an overnight parking sticker. And there are qualifications that the police department will check in order to give you a quote overnight parking sticker. And so one of the things that I'm always curious about, and I'm always, going back and forth, because again, it does require a large governmental infrastructure to implement a sticker program. But whether that cost benefit analysis, whether that the benefit to a city like Quincy, which has a lot of development coming into it, and again, encroaching on neighborhoods where you have single-family homes, you have two-family homes, you have multiple dwellings, plus these larger developments, which are supposed to have adequate parking. So whether that benefit to the neighborhoods is outweighed, by the cost of implementing such a huge governmental sticker program, hard to say. And so, I'd be looking for some input, as part of the study on perhaps maybe touching upon that in specific neighborhoods. Certainly not something citywide maybe we want to do, but maybe in specific neighborhoods where it's more problematic than others, ones that are near T-stops, also maybe something like that. So would love to see that incorporated to the workshops as a possibility. And with that, I would just make a motion for a positive recommendation. I know that others will speak, but I just want to have a motion for a positive recommendation on this, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilor Hughes, Councilor Leeang.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of questions. So, when we talk about traffic here across the city, I always try to say that it's not just, this broad term traffic. It means very specifically, congestion issues, parking issues, pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, all of which are issues that we need to address across the city, not just in the downtown, but again, in our different neighborhoods as well. I'm very happy to see here a phased plan from November 2017 all the way to October 2018. And that's good because, in this past year that we've created a new TPAL department, it feels, just from hearing from residents that they've expressed, it feels like there's been a lot of discussion around the traffic issue, but nothing that has been done. And this outline here shows, the steps that are going to be taken to then have some actual action after the fact. And that lead up has to do with this complete streets policy, making sure that we go through the procedure to be able to apply to MassDOT and have something that's going to be certified as being complete streets here in the city, which is great because it addresses, again, all of those issues of bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, and parking. I just want to go through the breakdown of the cost here. The number in front of us is 2.3, and it does say in here that 525,000 of that is going to be expended on components identified below, which are the activities that are needed in this first phase, such as the complete streets policy, getting that done, processing that application to be able to get grants in, conducting those road safety audits across the city to see where those key points are, as well as the community outreach part. So, in that entire thing that we just listed off here is the 525,000 essentially to go through, organize, make sure that we're not dropping the ball on anything, any problem areas, but then also processing that application to be complete streets ready. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then in here there's another 200,000 allocated for a request for technical assistance and for future projects that we then can take that money that will already be allocated to just start implementing these things right away. And then says that there is 1.575 here that's going to be allotted in conjunction with state and federal funding for the construction and design, again, to move those projects forward. So they can stop me anytime that I'm wrong, but it sounds like out of this 2.3, it's from soup to nuts. It's talking about the, collecting the data, getting all the information in, soliciting feedback from residents across the city, making sure that we have the application process completed and submitted, and then also funding in place to just get the ball rolling and get these fixes done right away. And am I wrong in that? It sounds like this is where the breakdown of the 2.3 is.
Not at all. You are correct. That's an accurate assessment. I think the way that we are approaching this and the way that we see it is that this first year will identify a number of action items things that can be and will be implemented, but also we'll start a somewhat rolling condition, if you will, that as we identify issues in the roadway safety audits or in some of the complete street, the prioritization plan, that either funding that comes from MassDOT or other sources will start to be identified. So year two will build on the work in year one and hopefully take some of the money, the money that comes from the funding programs from MassDOT and other sources to continue that work across the city.
So when you have in here October 2018, again, this is a timeline that I imagine might be moving if other things come up, but it says develop and then submit construction application in October 2018. Once that's submitted, how long do you, are you thinking months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? How long between that time that is going to be submitted to then when we'll see actual work being done in the streets to address the issues that we've worked on now? We're talking in a year's time to see some actual action on the streets to move forward on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one of our consultants to come up and address that question. Bill, if you don't mind. This is Bill Scully from Green International, and Bill is our complete streets expert, and one of the reasons that I advocated for Bill to be on our team is that I live in the town of Littleton, and Bill's firm has brought our town through policy, prioritization plan, and work on the ground in successfully receiving grant money through this program. So,
Bill's quite an intro, Bill. Welcome.
No pressure.
Thanks, Dave. The timing is actually fairly good. Right now, the next deadline for the MassDOT Complete Streets program is April 1 to get your plan in, and then May 1st to get an application in for some implementation money. So as David mentioned, and in your packet, there's that $400,000 amount that you can apply for to start implementing actions. And there's a number of actions that are eligible items. Obviously, $400,000 in the transportation world doesn't go a very, very long way, but it does do a lot of different things. So as Dave mentioned in Littleton, we developed a prioritization plan by last August, and on September 1st, we helped the town submit an application for implementation money. They were awarded a grant for implementation, I'm going to say maybe end of November at that time. And the construction is underway now for a new sidewalk, rebuilding a sidewalk, putting in some additional signage like the speed feedback signs on certain streets or school zone, flashing zone signs. So, and that was what Littleton wanted for their first year. And the other thing that's probably pretty good for, well, Weymouth is another example. Weymouth is out to bid now, or going out to bid very shortly for implementing just a mix of actions. But they wanted to focus on pedestrian crossings, speed management on some of their major streets. So, and again, it was a fairly quick turnaround. And so from a timeline, so let's say an application for funding that went in on May 1st, a decision by MassDOT would occur probably somewhere around mid-June, so that by fiscal year starting on July 1, you would have the announcement and the award or the ability to have the money available. And then it's a matter of then piecing together, if there's a bid item, a bid package to be put together, it's piecing that together and getting that to the street. And you'll have a certain amount of time to get something constructed. So it's very conceivable by fall of 2018, you're implementing some of those actions from the first year. And another reason why I'm saying Quincy's in a good spot at this point, and I know a lot depends on state revenues and all that, but what's been happening, it's become a very, very competitive program, but from MassDOT's perspective, they wanted to sort of spread the wealth so that communities that were awarded in the first round weren't going to be awarded in the second round, and they had to show that they were, implementing and getting things done.
I'm sorry to cut you off. So each round is once a year in the end of April, beginning of May?
Well, there's 2 submission deadlines. And again, this program, it really kicked off in early 2016. So it's a very young program, so the mechanisms have been sort of refined over the last year. But what it's come down to at this point, it appears there's 2 different deadlines in the year to apply for implementation money. So if you missed May 1st, then it'd be an October 1st. If you put in May 1st, didn't get awarded, you'd have an opportunity to put that same project in or refine the project for an October 1st.
So we'll be eligible at those 2 points every year to keep going back and applying, because like you said, 400,000 will go so far, and if we're talking about implementing fixes across the entire city, I imagine we'd want to do more than just the one-time 400,000.
I tend to agree. And so the way the legislation's written and the program set up is, in theory, you could go back every year and apply, just like a MassWorks kind of program. In practice, right now, they're not allocated. MassWorks may have $85 million available per year. The Complete Streets program doesn't have as large an amount at this point in time. And I said they're trying to, as new communities are developing their policy, developing their plan, they're trying to make sure all the communities are getting something. So, yes, every community can apply every year for up to $400,000. You just may not, over time, you're not going to get awarded probably every year. You're not going to be able to implement everything every year so quick. But again, it's turned into, I think there was some nervousness by some municipalities of, geez, I don't know, do we do this? What is MassDOT going to do? But we've put together almost a dozen plans and getting implementation money. We've gotten $2.4 million awarded to different communities, and it seems to be very positive. And every community does it a little different, and they show those small successes. You were all talking short-term, trying to get something going, and Dave mentioned that this program does enable you to do that. And you can spread out all around the community, or you can focus on one project. You can put a package of 8 different things together as part of that 400,000. So anyway, if there's any other questions.
No, that answers my question. Again, I think we have multiple issues citywide and many different neighborhoods, and the faster we can get something implemented and see some real effective results, I don't want to stand in the way of that. And this is something that I think we were all, or I should speak on behalf of myself, but this is something that I was expecting to see happen last year, when we first created the new department. And if this is a step in that direction, we can finally see some real effective results across the city addressing these issues that we have. I appreciate that you guys have put this together to show us a path on how to get there and how to get the financial support to get there as well. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. If I could ask Director of TPAL, come on up. Proceed on up. Good evening, Mr. Good evening, Mr. Coffey. Okay, Mike. So my concern here, first of all, I'm glad that you restructured this proposal. I think a number of councilors, including myself, have expressed a concern that we could study things together, but if we don't have money to fix it, we're no better off at the end of the day. So I'm glad we're cooperatively working towards a shared vision on this, and I think this represents that. I have some questions on it. One, I'm worried that you don't have the office infrastructure to support improvement at the end of the day. What do you say to that?
The office infrastructure?
Right, I mean, aren't you still taking things down on pen and paper?
Little less so. We've implemented a work order management system called Dude Solutions.
Dude Solutions?
Dude Solutions. Is that correct? Correct. Correct. Dude Solutions of all things. And I think when I was here in May, we had about 3,000 work orders we entered in there. We had, I think, completed 1,600, 1,400 ago. We added about 500 to that in June. And the work we did, by the way, with the approval you folks gave us for funding for summer help, we cleared that from about 1,800 down to about 700 over the work orders.
Oh, that's terrific.
So
That's terrific.
it's working now.
When you have numbers like that to share with us that are that positive, don't wait till you're asking for more money.
Yeah.
Send us a letter so we can, yeah, no, I'm serious.
That doesn't even include all the work, doesn't include all the fire alarm work, some of this stuff. And so,
But if you recall, when we created this department, that was something that Councilor Kane and I both said is, if you need more resources, come and tell us, but we also want to know progressively how you're doing. So that's not, I didn't know those numbers, I don't know that any other councilor did, but those are great numbers.
Yeah.
Love to hear those, keep coming. But you go back to your answer. So do you believe you have the internal infrastructure to support this?
Yeah, I think we're pushing in the right direction now. We put on a junior traffic engineer. We did get the summer help, which was really helpful in getting through that maintenance backlog. A lot of it was some easy work, but it was frustrating work for the residents that, the sign's been missing for 7 years, and I've called, 17 times about it. And then many times they called you, about those issues, so.
I've emailed you twice while you've been sitting over there.
I believe it. That's
really
normal, right? That's, and a good note too is, I would say, and Ernie and I and others have talked about this, about a year ago, we would get maybe 15 or 20 new complaints or more per day,
Concerns.
Yeah, concerns and valid issues, that hadn't been addressed over and over and over again. And we were just discussing this the other day, that those calls and those concerns have dropped dramatically. So it's kind of a nice note that we're fixing some of those frustrations that people had. And we haven't fixed everything, it's still out there, but I think we're pushing in the right direction. We feel better. We feel very good about this program. Much like you, Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of a money man. I love it when we get the state or the federal government to pay for our infrastructure. We spent a lot of time on complete streets, but there's always the roadway safety audits as well, which is more data-driven. One intersection we want to look at, Councilor, among others, is that Center Street, Bergen Parkway area. The funding for those programs is paid by the federal government, administered by the state, I believe. But there's really no limits on what they can fund if they think it's a valid type of issue. One thing we got to work within the confines of their program. It's somewhat data-driven on accident reports and stuff like that, but we do intend to pursue with AECOM investing, I think about 6 or 8 intersections already, and see if we can get some state funding and federal funding as well. So,
because when I read
these guys have really kind of opened our eyes to a lot of these funding paths that we really didn't know existed, and there's other paths as well, but it's kind of a stepping stone. The first thing you do is get complete streets, then you get into the roadway safety audits. We do have a roadway safety audit that was partially completed, I think, last year at the intersection of Southern Artery and C Street and McGrath Highway, and there was a host of short-term recommendations as well as long-term. We've asked the AECOM to work with us to go through those recommendations and see what we can do on a short-term basis. Mindful also of that intersection, and maybe other things happening in the next couple of years, so we don't want to spend a lot of money there. Right now, if we're going to have a new complex in that area, but we'll be applying to the roadway safety audit folks for funding for that as well. So there's a lot of good things there. I think that we're pushing in the right direction.
When I see ward-wide meetings, which is great, and I see traffic inventory, sign inventory, all that, I think of the drain on resources from the everyday issues that your department faces. That's why I have a concern about whether or not you have the internal infrastructure to even kind of assist with this. And I know this is what the money's for, to hire the outside consultants, but you or someone from your department, I trust, is going to be at these meetings, is going to be participating. So that's time away from, whether it's you, the traffic engineer, the junior traffic engineer, whoever it is, time away from trying to catch up on what's already a backlog. You're already in a department where your filter for getting things is larger than your, I suggest your ability to kind of make the necessary improvements. So my concern is throwing more at you. In the long run, are we worse off because then some of the smaller stuff drops by the wayside?
Well, I don't intend to let any of the smaller stuff drop. I think we can track that pretty well. I think the answer to your question, could we use more staffing? I think it was a yes, I think we could. I don't think we want it right now because we have to train that staff while we're trying to train them what we have. So I kind of see a building block approach to this, and I don't think we're far from where we need to be. I think we're using the traffic maintenance person in the spring. I might be able to get some help to do that. We could use another junior traffic engineer. There's a ramp-up time for these people, and we're training them what we have right now too.
So that leads to my next question is, would it not be cheaper in the long run for the city and more, let's use the word proactive, more long-term solution to hire another traffic engineer or junior traffic engineer whose sole job is to study? So if you have, and this is kind of my thought, you have two traffic engineers. One who does the routine everyday traffic engineer job that's happening now, but then you have another traffic engineer whose full-time job it is to take a giant step back and look at the city as a whole. Look at where development's happening, what the impact is on our current infrastructure and our current equipment, and kind of do some long-term planning. That's like, the 50,000-foot view engineer. Would that not be a better long-term solution than throwing a big chunk of money at it, studying everything, doing some planning, and then, at the end of that period, you're done, but things are changing while you're doing it. It's always moving.
I like that thought, because that way you don't contract from A to start B.
Right.
You're always moving, the operational piece forward as well as kind of the engineering planning. The difficulty is getting it to people.
Yeah.
It's just not available out there. We looked outside to hire a junior traffic engineer as well. We had folks approach, many folks kind of enticed them to come, and we didn't get a lot of things. I think traffic engineering is almost in a transition now, where it's almost, these folks are moving away from direct employment within cities and towns and going to the engineering firms a lot, and that's what they're telling us when we're talking to them as well. So, it's something we can certainly look at. If we can make something like that work, it would be a great idea.
So to carry that thought one step further, is you're saying by us hiring them, we're making it more difficult for us to hire an engineer. It's like this cycle, right? So we're going to pretend like they're not here for a minute. So they're kind of the problem why we can't find a traffic engineer, because they're able to pay them so much more to divvy them out to the city. Interesting. I would also just like to know, I'm sure you pay attention to things that happen up in the council and what other departments are doing, but there was another engineering position that was just, the salary was just increased by about 20-25% off the rip to get a new engineer because they couldn't hire someone. Your engineer is paid significantly less than what the advertised position was for that engineer to start with. The traffic engineer we had, when we hired it, was at a lower amount. So I would suggest, another, I think it's what, $589, another $20,000-$30,000 might entice someone. But it's something to think about on the budget term. And I know you're going to discuss that with the mayor, and you propose the budget, but from this councilor's perspective, I'll tell you, if you came to me at budget time next year and told me you wanted to hire another full-time traffic engineer because it was a long-term solution to some of our traffic problems, I wouldn't bat an eye. I really wouldn't. So keep that in mind. I don't know how other folks feel about it, but the will is there, I think, from the general public, certainly from those who vote for, traffic, development, and the condition of our roads. Three biggest things I hear about. So we're taking a big step tonight, I think, ultimately, in tackling some of the traffic issues. Speaking of that, development's a problem, right? I think development's a problem, right? So development's good, but you need to have development, you need to grow, you need to be developing in the right areas, in the right way, you need to plan for this stuff. So development itself isn't bad, but I think some of the problems that we're seeing is due to development. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's, you know, when you have more kids, it's not a bad thing, but you might, you know, have to move out of a studio apartment because you have 4 kids. So it's not a bad thing, but it's a natural outcrop of the situation you find yourself in. So we're in a development boom, more and more developments happening in the city. We're trying to encourage development in the downtown. I trust that will continue. So I guess, you know, when I look at something like this, you know, I think of my fiduciary obligation to the taxpayer, I think, well, it's not John Q. Public's problem. It's not John Q. Public's kind of fault that there's more traffic in the city. It's all this development. Yet we're going to borrow money, you know, with them on the hook for it, to help resolve the problems that are caused by the development. And I just wonder, you know, in my head, I kind of think it's really not fair for the taxpayers to pay this. There should be some sort of ongoing mitigation type fund where development is paying into for whatever the area is being developed, that area to be studied by, if it's these guys, if it's someone your office is contracting out. I mean, there almost should be a traffic study for anything, for any, you know, obviously not if you put a porch on your house, but for any reasonably sized development, because it's, and you and I have kind of talked about this, that you're doing this more now where you're having the traffic engineer look at some of the stuff that's before the zoning board, before the planning board, to kind of, to weigh in on what the impact's going to be, because until we get a handle on what's happening now, right, we're so far back, right? We have all these problems that weren't addressed previously, and we're trying to catch up to get to an equilibrium now that's comfortable traffic-wise, safety-wise. But development is never going to stop, right? Even in a down economy, there's still redevelopment of sites. There's always going to be development. So if we're not constantly looking at this and constantly looking at where the development is, what's happening on a project-by-project basis, neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis, we're going to fall behind again. And, you know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, other councils are going to be sitting around the well contemplating a giant, you know, high price tag study to get a hold of it. So what can you, I'm just rambling I guess at this point, but one, what do you think about, and are we able to charge any type of development fee for traffic fee to developers? And two, what are you doing now that we weren't doing in the past in terms of development with your office?
Well, what comes to mind, you know, first off is the sewer rehab fund. If you do any development activity within the city, beyond a certain size, you pay 1 or 2% of the sewer rehab fund for rehabilitation of sewer and drain infrastructure. And, you know, it'd be nice to see something like that for traffic. You know, and I'm not sure about the legality, but that's something I can talk to. I have mentioned to the planning department. We should probably get legal involved, maybe in a discussion of that and see if that's something that would be viable. Because I think we do have to keep an eye on development. And, I think we were pretty close with a lot of the large ones. We work with the planning department, quite honestly, a lot. And we're, one of the things we wrestle with is you look at an intersection like Granite Street and Bergen Parkway, a very old intersection that wasn't a good intersection when they built it. It was too wide to get across. Old infrastructure was down today, it was down yesterday because of the water and wind issues. And it probably going down 6 or 7 times a year. That's an intersection that we really would like to throw some money into just to get it going. And I think we'll have to get a new cab and some other things for an interim solution. But the long-term solution, we're probably going to do that whole intersection over, do some lane work and island work. Yet we wouldn't want to start that yet until we start that near that local development that's going to be in the area. If that's where Foxrock's going to be, or some stuff, but we want to work with them to kind of improve that intersection in the state for the Bergen Park at least. So we have an eye towards all of that, and I think we have a pretty good relationship with all these developers. Like, we talked to Atlantic down in North Quincy, and they've already committed to doing some flashing crosswalk signs for the homes through the area, you know, which is an extremely dangerous area, as well as to maybe do a study of that corridor for us. So we're trying to rope them into supporting the infrastructure. And by and large, they've been very, very supportive, I think, like that. And And I think that's a change that now we do get involved in, very active involved in these meetings. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
Okay. What about the wiring team that you have? Do you have enough?
I think we do right now. We're working on double poles a lot right now too, trying to clear that up. That's been a constant source of frustration. And we're part of that National Grid Verizon Comcast team. We get a notification, hey, you got to get these, so we jump right on us so we don't slow the train down. I think we're making some good progress. We, kind of a similar type issue to some of the traffic stuff, some very old infrastructure. As a matter of fact, we're really going out for some gig work right now to lay new wiring around Quincy Center because it's rusted, it's brittle now.
And is this for the call boxes?
Sorry?
Is this for the?
Well, not even the call boxes. We have 700 to 800 commercial customers hooked up to our fire alarm network. They've got their sprinkler and alarm systems that go off in the fire enterprise. And that's largely what our network is serving right now, as well as all the public buildings in addition to that, all the alarm systems wired back into fire headquarters.
So is that the bulk of what they're doing? It's not box, it's not the alarm box?
Yeah, but alarm box is there hasn't been an alarm box pulled really in over 10 years.
That's right, because I was going to ask, what was the last time?
They're just,
Why do we even have them almost? Like, are we paying people to support boxes that nobody's using? I mean, I went the other day to my daughter's board, she asked me what it was. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, you know what's probably abused? I'm not going to explain it for them.
show her a landline telephone.
Yeah, I'm like, it's a pretty light, so don't worry about it. Use your cell phone.
Yeah, we don't spend any real we focus more on the commercial piece and on testing and with those commercial customers. In our own buildings and our own systems and our buildings are our responsibility as well.
Okay. So we're going to see some improvement, Mike? That's the coffee guarantee? We're
Guaranteed.
going to see some improvement.
As a matter of fact, we did start another program this summer. Once again, we were able to use the summer kids, which was great with our engineering staff. And we had them sit at various intersections and do traffic counts and turning counts. One example was Billings Road, a frustration of Billings Road coming off of Hancock Street is you may be the 6th or 7th car in line, but if the first two people are trying to take a left, you may sit through 2 cycles there. So we're implementing a left lead arrow there that will give us 8 seconds to get through that intersection, maybe 10 sections, and move the traffic through there. We're doing it, I think we're going to probably do that in West Swanham Street and Harvard Street. The study came out favorably. We did it in Kendrick Avenue and Franklin already. We've got some calls from constituents up there as well. I think we have 1,000 Southern Arteries. Matter of fact, we'll be doing there to turn on to Des Moines and South Street from Southern Artery. And those are some of the things where the feedback is pretty good because it's a frustrating thing when you're sitting there and you've gone through 3 cycles because someone's trying to take a left turn. And if we can push a little more traffic through some of these, a little faster, I think everybody will know that.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Vaughn, Mr. Coffey, did you say that you're going to put, if you're coming down Southern Artery and those Roach Brothers, you're going to install that left green arrow only? Wow, that's a long time in the making. So
I heard that from many people, it was a long time.
Yeah.
And the only hold up on that right is we have to check with the state first on some lane issues, but we'll definitely go to do that.
Council Palmucci, I mean, I agree with you to an extent. You kind of stole my thunder as I was processing this, and I'm going to support it tonight because, we hear it here all the time, traffic and parking. But, we've been going through a development cycle of literally 2, 3, probably arguably 4 years. I've been thinking how many zoning board meetings I've been over the last couple calendar years. The larger deals and some of the smaller deals, I think it could have maybe a running start a little bit with some mitigation to either fully support this appropriation or partially support it because you're right, Council, and I do agree with it. The residents that are talking, that I'm interacting with, it's questions around development, how we grow responsibly, but at the end of the day, these some of these larger developments, they're contributing to the traffic ailments that we face on a daily basis, and to the single household family. They're saying, well, we didn't create this, right? And they'll have to pay for it. So, you know, to turn a blind eye and say, you know, I'm going to support, you know, what I think will be progress and confident in your team and the presentation that you put together. So to turn your eye, I think would be short-sighted, but I guess the spirit of the message is, you know, when these deals are negotiated out before they hit our desk, I mean, yeah, right, they show there should be investment in traffic and parking to help mitigate the ancillary side effects.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think, and I've told you this, you have one of the toughest jobs in the city, right? I mean, when people call you, more often than not, they're probably not telling you.
Oh, we've actually gotten some thank you calls lately.
That's great.
I think one was on that 7-year-old sign that hadn't been replaced. So.
And I know the fact, the folks up in, you know, my area, 2545 School Street, we've had an awesome dialogue with your staff, Mike Doherty, and, you know, the improvements that took place there and will take place out back on Broadway Parkway. I mean, these are improvements for, you know, senior citizens on major thoroughfares. So there is no progress, and thank you for that. Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, I'm going to probably bring up the team first, and then I'll come back to you. But just a little bit about traffic, parking, bicycle, pedestrian safety master plan, and traffic improvements. We've been waiting for this day for a long time to find out where the mitigation needs to be. And a lot of my colleagues have talked more about traffic, and I wanted to get into a little bit different tier here, which is there's one of these pages you have here. It's called Road Safety Audits at High Accident Locations. I get a lot of emails and phone calls with, you got to do something at that intersection. Someone's going to get killed. Or there's a lot of speeding going on this. What you have for a dialogue here is you have some hot areas where we have a lot of accidents that are happening throughout the city of Quincy. I see one of them over here, Southern Artery, C Street. Crashes, 16, injury, 12. We know that's in front of the McDonald's there, right by the Stop and Shop, and the Stop and Shop gas station. People just walk right out there all the time. I travel that road extensively. I live close to that area, so I'm going down it, but people just walk right out. And it's like Frogger. You ever play Atari when you were a kid? Frogger, they just go right out. That's what it's like. And it's very, very dangerous in that intersection. I mean, it happens every day. I see it every day. With that being said, are you going to have recommendations? Are you going to have contingency plans to say, well, this is the mitigation, this is the problem right here, this is what you'll have to institute to do this. You'll have to institute a crosswalk here, or you'll have to do a contingency plan. You may have to enforce a jaywalking rule. Is there going to be anything that you're going to establish after you get this? Because I'm looking mostly at the pedestrian safety master plan, which one of our councils is not here tonight, but he came about with the pedestrian safety throughout the city of Quincy, which I fully support Councilor Kane. As we're a growing city, we're going to be walking around a lot more. What are you looking to do in other municipalities that you see a lot of foot traffic like we have in our city? I mean, not everything is related to the person in the vehicle. It's also sometimes the person that's walking and just darting right out. What have you seen in other municipalities that you do based on there's not a lot of enforcement for jaywalking, or there's not a lot of enforcement for people? What do you do? How do you do that?
I think in some cases, and in general for the roadway safety audits, there are a number, there are sometimes 20 recommendations based on, you know, the different conditions, from striping a crosswalk to implementing a ped signal to the hawk, you know, out here in front, you know, that kind of system. We're out there with, you know, in each of these, we're out there with police, fire, public health, staff, council, and interested parties, and basically it's a field visit for everyone to download their experiences or their concerns about that location. they get entered into this report, you know, and the idea is, okay, we've got all these recommendations, let's start doing something. And no, we may not be able to afford the $90,000 full PED signal setup at the moment, but we can do striping or hatching or whatever, you know, in that tier. And it happens, you see, you know, what we've seen in other locations. In Everett, I have an example where at one of the circles, which are crazy, at Santilli Circle, there's a path in the dirt right across the circle. There are no signals, there are no crosswalks, there are accidents, there are near misses. And I think one of the things you allude to is, you know, there are crashes that are recorded, and there are things that aren't recorded that are near misses every day. And I think that that's where the local experience, you know, comes into play with us being able to make a recommendation, you know, validated by police, fire, health, you know, whomever, to take those things seriously and get things done.
Some of my main concerns have been out in front of 1007 Artery, which I want to thank Mr. Mike Coffey for coming in there with me for a coffee hour in the last month. And I visited there quite a bit and hear the seniors talk about how dangerous some of these intersections are and how important that when we do this study that we start to mitigate and maybe do some more crosswalks, certain paints, certain angles, timing, the sound of the, you know, the traffic light. I mean, these are, another place I think of is the Fennel House, right over there by St. C's on Hancock Street. Very important crosswalk that the seniors have right across the street from them. That's very, very important to me, as well as going another tier down with the schools. I've been talking about it since I was on the school committee that we need the proper signals and crosswalks and paint at these major ones. And one I can think of is Lincoln Hancock, going over to Kincaid, which you guys will do a design study with this whole situation. There are certain areas of the city, another one I think of is Parker School, which is on Billings Road. I think of these intersections, and I think how dangerous they are when people from outside our city come in and they bomb through these school zones and they bomb through these senior housing areas, and it really upsets me. And this is an area in this traffic study that we need to find out the volume that these vehicles are going through, the speed they're going through these intersections. This is very important data that we need to compile and move forward to understand what the mitigation concerns are. Another area that I continuously hear, and I might have to bring up my coffee on this one, is the parking concerns. As our city is growing, we're getting a lot of vehicles parking on the street and into neighborhoods, and it's just so difficult, especially in the wintertime, to plow those streets. Overnight parking for commercial vehicles and stuff like that. We need to do a better job on enforcement, and maybe I can bring up Mike at this time to talk a little bit about what we're going to go in the next phase of finding out all this information in this study, and what we're going to do with the enforcement end of it. Because I've talked to some of the police, Quincy police, about the enforcement end, and we also have this new division of CHPAL. We need to figure out where are we going to give out these tickets? Who is going to sit in a vehicle or outside and patrol one-ways or do not enters at different times? Or who's going to do the speed traps? Who's going to give out more ticketing? I'll be honest with you, we got to give out more enforcement. Whether it be what is called a dummy ticket, where it's actually not a real ticket. You ticket the whole street, you say, this is your warning. If you're overnight parking, you don't have a sticker, you're going to get a ticket next time. Because what we're doing right now is not necessarily working, because as I continuously knock on those doors, traffic and parking come up continuously, and they always tell me, well, Councilor DeBona, we need a little bit more enforcement. Well, guess what? I have to facilitate that language of that doorstep of the people and the citizens of the city to all of us. And we all need to work together to mitigate this. This is part of the process, but we have to get to the enforcement part. Do you have recommendations to say, listen, you can do all these studies, but if you don't enforce this stuff, it makes no sense. Or whether you do a contingency plan, how do you do this? How do you do a traffic study or do a whole design like this and say, well, this doesn't work unless you do X, Y, and Z? How do you do that? How do you map that in? Do you have an idea where or how you do that?
Well, I think in regard to the parking and the
Sure.
enforcement, it is that balance, because it costs money to enforce. There's technology, that helps in that. There's still enforcement. There are meters, there are, the hockey pucks that can be in the spaces that identify, time and use and all of that. But it all gets down to investment, either a capital investment or a labor investment. And this is a very large in geography city, and to patrol all the streets, some of the streets. If you're doing it in one section of the city and not in another, then it has to be citywide. There can be a case study or pilots. You can get away with that. I mean, get away is not the right language, but
If I could I bring up Mike just to ask these questions? Just I think it's more geared towards him now because you're the study of this whole thing, and I think with our new TPAL division, Mike, thank you for coming in tonight. It's very important. Just to get back on some of the questions I asked, just about the parking tickets. Are we going to put that in your division now, or are we going to keep that on the police, the Quincy police side?
Well, enforcement's still with police, but I do think there's two issues. There's education and enforcement.
Okay.
And I just got today when you mentioned the parking ticket, is we've been working on doing our own parking ticket, which is using the snow office quite frequently, It says if you're parked overnight in the street where a snowstorm is towed, this would be a parking ticket that will say, you park within 20 feet of the intersection or the corner, you would have received a $50 fine. If you're parked on the sidewalk, you would receive a $25 fine. Kind of as an education type of piece and say, so please don't do that. And I've talked to Captain Dugan, the police department as well, and we're going to review a draft over with him over the next several weeks. And he's committed to sending some officers out at night to problem areas and dropping some of these tickets. I think he's committed, as we are, to education and enforcement. That education is kind of the first step. We get many people say, you couldn't park on one. Well, state law, you're not allowed to park within at least 20 feet of the intersection, anywhere, whether there's a sign or not. So just to kind of get that word out. And many people say, well, I've been parking on my sidewalks for years. I say, well, that's illegal. In the city, you cannot do that. And you cannot walk in a news driveway. And these other things that we might have grown up with, but we've kind of gotten away from it a little bit. And it's more problematic in some neighborhoods other than others. But rather than come up and hit people with a ticket right off the bat, we'd like to hit them with a warning first. Just say, hey, don't do that. Commercial vehicles on the street at night, the police do all, they take it quite frequently. And they're very good to me when I get a complaint and what a big problem with overnight parking. I say, hey, you got to get down to the street. But I think that's big enough. We've got to do a better job of parking on folks. And there's some things we're looking at. We've looked at some of the other cities and towns, how they're doing it, but we have more work to do there.
I like what I'm hearing, the communication amongst the TPAL division, the Quincy police, the council, city council, on education. I think the key that you just said, give out a warning, educational ticket. Listen, if you do this again, we have to give you a real ticket. I mean, that's important. I think that's the first step that we really need to go out and start.
I think that's the right approach.
I think it is too. And I've recommended that at doorsteps to people that have given me this dialogue because I hear it a lot. And when you said pockets, there's different streets that I hear it more on. And I'll get to one door and then 3 doors down, they'll be saying the same thing. So it's like, I know there's an issue here. So just to get back on the do not enters and the one-ways. Do not enters 6 in the morning till 9. What are we doing currently to enforce those areas? Are we patrolling out a police officer just when it gets called, or how do we have somebody that's basically a rover that kind of goes in certain different neighborhoods and just kind of camps out
But
and sees?
that's a police enforcement issue. We can't do any moving traffic violation. Please do that. And I think it's largely reactive. I think they would tell you, council, that it's just because we have so many of those now that, you know, to proactively check every one of them every single day. They don't have the resources.
So right now, we just don't have the resources.
But when they get a call, they'll go out there.
Okay.
They'll be out there the next day.
I mean, we were talking, Councilor Palmucci was talking about, do you need more junior traffic engineers? Do you need more, another traffic engineer? I'd like to hire a police officer that just gives out tickets. And it just gives out tickets for one-ways and do not enters. And he or she will roam the city. And you know how that person's gonna get paid back with their salary? Through giving out tickets.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and that solves the issue, because it's quality of life for the residents and the citizens of the city. That's what I care about. And you know, sometimes you just have to do it. And you know, if it's a good faith error, it's a good faith error. They didn't really see the sign. But we have to do more enforcement, because I know that people outside the city are bombing through these neighborhoods with cut-throughs, and they don't care. And their thing of their knowledge is, well, you guys don't really enforce in Quincy, so we're just going to go through these neighborhoods. We cannot have that going around the city of Quincy. We need to be, you go through Quincy and you cut through these neighborhoods, you're going to get a ticket. That's the model that we should have and establish as we're growing as a city. This is very important to me. I get out in that ground and I knock on those doors, and this is what I continuously hear. Well, I have to facilitate that language that those residents are telling me here. I didn't make this up. Many residents have told me the story, and I told them, I'll facilitate it, and when it's the right time, and I'll tell someone like yourself that we're in that stage now as we're growing. We're a city that's really, really growing. And listen, I go down a lot of, you know, Furnaceburg Parkway, and we have a lot of do not enters up into Willow and all these other areas. And I understand there's a lot of ground to cover. But if we strategically get out there and get into certain neighborhoods and establish and set the tone for the city that, listen, come into Quincy and you go down these one-ways and do not enters, you're going to get a ticket. And if we can establish that and set the tone, then they won't do it anymore. And there'll be less of it happening. We just have to get to that stage. We're evolving as a city. My job is to get up here and represent the people and tell all of us, what is going on? What are they saying? And I have to continuously do that. That's what I'm a spokesperson for them. So in a nutshell, I know the resources just aren't there yet, but it's something to consider as we move forward. It's something that we need to do as a municipality, as a TPAL division, as the police officers in our city to really come together and really enforce these. Because I think the biggest thing in the next phase of moving the city forward is enforcement. I really do. We can do all these traffic studies all we want, but if we don't enforce some of these things, or we don't mitigate, or we don't do contingency plans, it's not going to work. People are going to do the same habits and conditions that they come into the city. My main concern is people outside the city bombing through our city, and it's happening. And you know, these big freight trucks going through neighborhoods in the morning. I hear it all the time. And I'm like, okay, let's just try to bring somebody out there and do that. But we just need to do a little bit more enforcement. And I think if we work together and we all know what's going on and we're on the level playing field, I think we'll tackle this.
Well, as we move forward with that, you come in some of these community meetings, we'll have the police in these meetings as well. And I do think that they are moving in that direction as well, towards more enforcement.
Go ahead. I know you got.
Yeah,
I know.
we've done more than one, yeah.
I was kind of talking about her name.
But that's a good point. Enforcement, I think, we stepped up. I think the police are aware of it, and I think we're moving in that direction. Lieutenant Matt Tobin is really focusing on traffic and parking and other issues that, like, he hasn't got a huge staff, but he's starting to move things in the right direction.
I just think the timing of this, to talk about this, is right on point with our traffic study. It's just on point to talk about the enforcement end of it, to tailor this up, because it's not going to make a difference if, you know, we don't start mitigating right away. So with that being said, I'm going to be in full support of this. This is something I've been waiting for about a year here, being on the council. this, we have to move forward. This is important data that we're going to find out what's going on in the city, and we'll move on from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Previously spoken on the matter, Councilor Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm tribute to Mr. Coffey. Like one of the statistics you talked about, and I think I mentioned 1,400, you said you had 1,800 outstanding traffic complaints, you're down to 700. You're using Dude Solutions, have since had plenty of time to Google this work management system. Are you able to extract reports by ward? I'd love to review and what Ward 1 outstanding complaints or concerns there are, because I know that I have submitted many that are outstanding, like stop sign requests. I think that might have been my Ward 1 sign that has been down for years and been trying to back up. So I'd be curious to see if you're able to run that as a report as to what's outstanding.
We can look at it. I don't think we've got it broken down. Pull up
Is it
Ward 1.
GIS?
It is GIS, so I can pull out a geographic area though.
Yep.
And we can print that. I think we could do that, we'll print out all the, well, you know, it's not we can do.
Okay, I mean, I just think, for a content management system, we need to be able to get that data out there. Where are these requests? Is there one area? Is it the same request keeps coming in? How is that kind of getting debriefed, right? So I'd be very interested in seeing what you have here there. I know that there is many, and I think you've done a great job coming into really, we're grateful that you took the job because you walked into a big mess and you've had lots of great successes already. So I'd be curious to see some of that, the cross-reference. Let's see. There was a statistic that I had heard about 70,000 cars registered in the city of Cleveland. Do you believe that to be 70,000 vehicles?
It rings a bell.
And it's a big, just to say, it was a big number. We talked about traffic coming through our cities, that our own traffic is at the entire South Shore, in addition to twice a day. I guess what I'm looking for is, as you're walking through this, one, understanding what's happening in the city and utilizing this firm to help us understand that. You talked about outreach neighborhood by neighborhood meetings. When is the timeline we'll be seeing that? Like, what is it you're looking for from the neighbors?
Probably later this fall or early winter.
So this is one of the early action items of this plan. We're going to go, the field team's going to go out to the neighborhood, community meetings with understanding what are your biggest gripes, what is it you're seeing? Because, I feel like I'm constantly fielding these 20 through the intersection. The people who live in these neighborhoods saying, what we see it every single night, this is what we see in the neighborhood. Now you're going to be able to capture that data, put that into your plan, and come up with a strategy.
In fact, part of the criteria for getting your complete streets policy approved is to have community meetings. So that's part and parcel of the thing. We have to do that, we want to do that, and we'll work with the mayor's office, maybe in conjunction with 400 as well, and maybe that. So we don't know exactly, when and where we're going to do it, but we're working to all that.
And I think the other part for me was not knowing what signalization. I remember when visiting Deb again when she first came on board as our traffic engineer and seeing her on a computer screen. And there's about 6 signals in the city of our probably 200 that were have the technology that she can pull them up and adjust the timing. And the problem is the new signals aren't talking. The old signals are so antiquated. And I guess I'm looking at the time, she was saying, I have no idea what's out there, right? So there's a lot of it, it's in your head, it's in the, purchase order from however many decades ago when this equipment was bought. So walk me through when we see this cataloging of the signals so that we're getting and I guess a timeline for when we can implement modern signalizations that we can pull up and adjust the timing remotely.
Well, I think that'll be part of this first phase of this program as well, the signalization inventory and analysis.
Right, so phase 1, yeah.
They'll collect all the information that we have, all the data we have, any missing gaps from the vault. They'll actually analyze the cabinet, see what's in there, and then put this together for us, as well as a priority. Matter of fact, I can name 2 or 3 intersections right now that I know need to be worked on immediately.
Seeing something out of the top of your list?
It's right there, yep. And there were some short-term improvements that we want to go out there, and I've talked to these folks about already.
You and I have multiple
And I just want to see what will the benefit be if we spend this 30, 40, 50 grand,
So-
We don't want to do a full $1 million fix there because of what may be happening. But I think the state's going to step to the table on that, but we may have to do some of the smaller things.
I wish I could share your optimism of the state stepping to the table, but we have been partnering with the state on the C Shore Drive intersection as well as the C Street corridor, and for years now, we've seen drafts and, hey, stay tuned, and no action, right? So for the residents of Ward 1 who all go through, particularly the C Shore Drive intersection, and know it's failing, and should have this frustration for decades. We've talked about widening that intersection for the entire 8 years I've been in office. It's been, hey, we're gonna work on that, and we have funding, we're partnering with MassDOT, but where's the action? Where's the implementation? It's still a project pending. So I'd love an update. I know Frank has been, the mayor's office has been project managing that, but I'd love if you could provide us an update that I can send out to my constituents about where that stands. Because we're talking about it. I mean, it's a long time, right? But it's not, the ball's not in our court, and I think that's part of the frustration. So as much as we're like, hey, great, MassDOT's getting involved, we potentially get funding. MassDOT's involved in the Shore Drive intersection project, and that has been painfully slow.
Well, I think that one of the differences, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the roadway safety audits, if we can get them to step to the plate and say, yeah, we agree that this is a safety issue here, we need to come up with some of these improvements. They fund it, we do the work, we do the engineering, we do the construction. And we'd rather do that, then we get control of the one step.
So we have the data, in place at Shore Drive. It's no surprise, it's a substantially failed intersection. And I guess why in that situation? I thought the
Well,
state.
because that's a DCR.
Oh, because DCR is not, that further complicates things.
But that's the flying way.
Right, wrong acronym. Okay, I think we have really vetted this substantially. I appreciate your good work. We need to do anything we can be doing to make improvements in the traffic. Clearly, your department has been utilized, we've done some under resource rather. We've done some restructuring. We need the funding. We need the outside help. I don't know if there's a motion on the table, Mr. Chairman. There is. Okay. Move the motion with the question.
Thank you, Councilor, and again, Mr. Coffey, hearing that green arrow at 400,000 the morning's coming today. You literally made my year, and in all sincerity, the folks of 1,000, greatly appreciated. So there's a motion made by Councilor Hughes a while back. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilor Cohen.
Yes.
Councilor Finn. Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Hughes.
Yes.
Councilor Forrest.
Yes.
Councilor Yang. Yes. Councilor Calmucci.
Yes.
Chairman Cohen.
Yes. All members, 6 members voting in the affirmative. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Coffee and team. At this point, I would entertain the motion to adjourn. Finance Committee closed at 10:35. Thank you, everyone.